here. We're getting a couple of outside presentations as well. Then the second half tomorrow is really trying to focus on, okay, the first day and a half, what are the takeaways from that? What are the key strategic priorities we want to focus on? How should we operationalize those amongst council members, staff as appropriate, budgetary resources, etc. A lot of the strategic priority issues are going to stem from what the Planning Commission recommended in Kiawah Next, which the council adopted. There's some big picture items in there that probably warrant a fair amount of discussion. Any other initial opening comments from fellow council members?
No, thank you. No.
Stephanie?
No. Ready to get started?
The first agenda item is finance administration. We started with that one at this time, in part because a lot of the budget issues, budgetary ramifications of certain proposed actions will depend a lot on kind of what we think about the administration of our balance sheet. So what I wanted to do is start off with an extension. I think each of the council members were at the town hall meeting the other day, and I wanted to kind of build on that to make sure that we collectively, staff, the community, have a pretty good understanding at a little more granular level of our budget and our reserves and what the implications of those things are for making decisions about strategic priorities going forward. So, Dorota, if I could kind of turn to you first I don't know if we have a kind of a slide just showing.
Yes.
First of all, with the balance sheet, the reserves.
Yes, so as of the end of, or half year of the end of December, our reserves are about $50 million. Of this amount, about 26.5 is general fund reserves, which means those are reserves that could be spent up to council discretion. 12.4 is in restricted funds, and those are restricted by law or our local ordinances to be spent on, just in a big picture, tourism related.
So I just want to make it clear, that 12 those are all restricted funds that are subject to statutory limitations.
Correct.
So accommodations, hospitality, state accommodations.
Correct. Well, that 2.6 is in state accommodation taxes, and they, well, maybe not mostly restricted by, there's additional oversight of how that money is spent. And the rest is in local, county, and hospitality taxes.
There's also a time frame for the state.
Correct, it's 2 years. Mm-hmm. And we have about 10.8 million in, so we call it capital fund. That money is designated to future capital or capital expenditures or beach renourishments.
Just to be clear on that bucket,
yes,
we've made the decision historically to allocate in these designated funds.
Correct.
But there are actually no legal restrictions whatsoever. We have as much discretion with respect to that 10.8 as we actually do with the general fund.
Correct. Mm-hmm. It was just a decision, council decision. I can't remember if it was a resolution or how that fund is going to be built. So there is certain amount of money every year that we collect in hospitality and local accommodation taxes is transferred to that fund. And it's been growing. We have never used that capital fund to fund any capital projects, for example, like the bike path improvements or something. So far we funded all our capital expenditures through our operating fund. We have not dipped into that capital fund yet. So that's our reserves. As far as
Just so a little bit further on that. So the 12 point, whatever, the restricted funds. I know we've had discussions about this in other contexts, just so everybody understands. Those are subject to either county restrictions or state law restrictions and how those monies can be expended.
Yes.
They need to be tourism related. There's kind of a general tourism related in the statute. We can pull up the statute if anybody's interested. And a general reference to tourism related, providing for, attracting or providing for tourists. And then there are a list of specifically enumerated things that are deemed to be tourist related, like civic and cultural facilities, for example.
beach renourishment.
Beach renourishment. There are slight differences, not huge differences. Generally, the state accommodations tax list of permitted expenditures overlaps with those for hospitality and local accommodations and hospitality taxes. There are some slight differences,
Yes.
but they're generally the same.
Yes, and the county actually, there is, like the mayor mentioned, the state accommodation tax is regulated by the state statute. County doesn't really have a statute, but they follow the state. Local accommodation and county, local and hospitality is regulated by our own ordinances that pretty much mirror state. Plus, additionally, hospitality that was added a few years ago, the money from hospitality can be spent on flood mitigation, meaning some road work related to that. So they expended it a little bit more for those funds.
So I have a question.
Yes.
You indicated we fund that bucket with state accommodations tax?
On which bucket?
Well, the capital reserve.
No, that's not from state. It's only from hospitality and local.
Hospitality
And local.
Okay, so hospitality doesn't have a time frame for when you have to spend the money?
No,
Okay.
no, only state accommodation tax has 2 years.
That was my question.
And the one thing about the state accommodations tax, we've heard this arise before, it's the only one of the restricted fund revenue sources that has this provision that just talks about the proportion of expenses related to tourism-related activity. The others do not. And so we've utilized, based on the number of inputs, a lot of it were reflected in the Kiawah Next by the numbers, that 70-30% allocation.
Yes.
So that's only a state accommodations tax.
The county doesn't have anywhere to spend.
So they used to, well, the county, they used to,
They may apply that to us, but
yeah, but also they used to require us to spend all what we have received. But that has changed.
Oh,
That
okay,
has
because I
changed.
remember they used to, they had that, okay.
So,
But it
and
was
just one-
just the requirement.
And just one detail on the state accommodation tax, it's generally a 2-year window to spend it, but if you write to them and tell them, we have this project, and here's how we're gonna spend it, you can spend it over a longer period of time.
Oh, all right.
But you've gotta
You'll require
define
know that.
expended.
what it's gonna be.
I didn't know that.
But absent that, you've got a 2-year window to spend it on.
Just
so
as an example, when we
PGA.
wrote- when we wrote in for the PGA for the bus, we had to write into the state to give us that extension, and they
Got
did,
it.
because of how we funded.
I didn't know that, thank you.
Also, it's kind of like LIFO. It's how the money rolls in and out. So
it's a rolling 2 years.
correct. So it's you know, we've never got to the point of zero. We never reached zero, and well, anyway, but
Historically,
it
we've always
has-
rolled
yes,
some amount.
we rolled that, but
So you said road work as we were breaking off. Can you expand on that?
so one thing about road work. If we provide infrastructure for tourists, and as Mayor mentioned, we justify that 70% of our traffic or people on the island are tourism. So 70% can be spent on any work related to improving the Parkway, Beach Walker Drive, because those are the roads getting to the beach. So that's one example. The other example was when, as I mentioned, the hospitality added this flood mitigation when years ago we had those floods. So pretty much just fixing roads that were damaged by the flood. So that's the road work.
So could they be used for roads behind the gate?
So behind the gate,
Those
using
go to
state
beach too.
accommodation taxes is a different discussion that we had a couple of times, but
KICA would have to apply for specific flood mitigation projects through state tax, and we could approve that. But just as us to spend it, they are KICA's roads, so it stops at the main gate.
But KICA could apply.
They haven't ever done it that I know of historically. They're really nervous about us, giving them money. We would say that they could.
There is a view, it's not one that I fully ascribe to, that the public expenditures behind the gate impair the sanctity of the gate. That the view is the gate would have to go away, that if there is a public facility, and this gets to Sora Rail, which is actually going to be a conversation we've come up before, we lease that, but I guess the view has been we couldn't own the little plot of land where the Sora Rail recycling and waste management facility is, because then the public would, the broad public would have access to that. That's frankly a ridiculous notion. There are all sorts of public facilities, like jails, for example, that not just everybody can go to just because it's an expenditure of public dollars. Now, there is an issue with regard to expenditure of public funds for primarily private benefit. That is what is prohibited by the South Carolina State Constitution. So, public funds have to be used for a public purpose. So you have to identify the public purpose to justify the expenditures of the funds, but court cases, attorney general opinions, and others are very clear that there can be incidental private benefit. It just can't be, the expenditure of public funds can't be primarily for the benefit of private parties.
So since this can go both ways.
Well, yeah, and historically, Brad's right. That's just been the philosophy of certain board directors, that they hesitate to take the money. It doesn't, we haven't needed it badly enough to test it.
I was gonna say, it sounds like it's an option to consider.
It could be.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the
It's
issues
definitely an
where
option.
specifically, this is a conversation that's been had in various quarters, is apply for boardwalks because they're used by tourists.
Right.
I mean, they're used primarily by tourists. The view has been expressed that, well, then we would have to open it up to the public, and that their boardwalks could no longer be restricted to association members and their guests. I mean, again, that's been the theory. What people have to understand is, right now, there are already 2 publicly owned pieces of property behind the gate, apart from anything that the town is. There are 2 St. John's fire districts. That's public property, public money. Doesn't mean that just anybody can come in and just go hang out at the St. John's Fire District station. So these are bigger picture kind of questions and issues, but it does start get to things like, beach renourishment. This isn't, Stephanie and I had an extensive conversation with Isle of Palms.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, most of our beach is privately owned. KICA owns a large swath of 8 miles of beach from the mean high tide line landward to the property line. Its public trust property is only mean high tide seaward. So can we actually do a beach renourishment project that involves land that is owned by KICA or not? It's actually, Isle of Palms has looked at exactly that issue. A lot of other jurisdictions now, they've concluded, well, the private property owner has to pay for like 80 or 70 or 80% of it.
Yeah.
It's a kind of an arbitrary line drawing, but those are the issues. We're not unique in trying to tackle
Part of-
So is Isle of Palms using state tax money?
Yes, they use, well, they use state tax money and they use state grants and other funds. They get more, they have multiple sources for beach renourishment projects. They've got to undertake those fairly routinely. So the question again is always, is it an appropriate use of public funds to support primarily private interest? Because the top third, the northern third of Isle of Palms is wild dunes. And they've done beach renourishment
And
projects.
so it's gated.
Yes, it is.
So it's only, it's reasonable apples to apples?
In many respects, we're, you know, some respects like Seabrook, some respects like Isle of Palms, we're all slightly different, but there are some, at least, nectarine, not nectarines, what are these smaller little things next to oranges? Tangerines. You know, close tangerines and oranges or something like that, if not apples to apples.
One thing that's important to remember too is the definition of tourists. So because somebody has a permanent house here, they can be a tourist. Tourist means a full-time resident or somebody that lives further than 50 miles away.
Not a full-time resident.
Not a full-time resident
Right.
and lives more than 50 miles away.
That's helpful.
So if you are here and you have a house, but you live in New York City or Chicago, wherever, that's your domicile, that's your residence.
So 80% of the island.
80% of the island are tourists.
Well, that's interesting.
Well, it's actually, we get to that calculation even apart from that because, and then we'll get in maybe a little later, the Planning Commission spent a lot of time, and I did, working with John and others. There are a little over 2,000 full-time residents on Kiawah Island. We're estimating that the average daily overnight accommodation is 5,000 to 6,000 people. And that,
Wait, you're saying that that's the average on island every day?
yes, overnight accommodation every day. And at peak, it's 10,000 to 12,000. Now remember, and we'll get into this in another context, there are 1,300 and some, I thought it was 1,400, but there's some double counting there, 1,300 some properties that are in the short-term rental program. There are approximately 4,000 bedrooms on the island that are available in the town to rent at any given point in time by members of the public. There are another 350 hotel rooms in the town that are available to rent by members of the public at any given point in time. So that's why we have a combination. We have the data from CVB that we've looked at that shows that the average occupancy for the rentals, the short-term rentals, is over the course of the year 60-some%.
Almost 70, yeah.
Then that's relatively consistent. Bounces up and down a little bit. Now, obviously, lower than in the off season. You're probably close to 100% occupancy during the peak season. Lower, but you can just kind of start doing the math. And then what we also know, I think Kika had done a survey, and we know this anecdotally, that there are approximately 1,000 full-time properties. A little over 1,000 full-time dwelling units that are occupied by full-time residents on Kiawah Island. There are over 4,000 dwelling units, 4,100 or so. We have 1,300 in a short-term rental program. That leaves the remainder of a little short of 2,000. Is that right? A little, yeah. That are owned by part-time property owners. But there is some percentage of part-time property owners that are here at any given point in time. And they're obviously more over the holidays and the peak season, but they're here all the time. I mean, there's always some that are here all the time. And what we've also learned anecdotally is part-time property owners have, over the last few years since the pandemic, increased the amount of time they are spending here.
So part of why I ask, and I get asked, in fact, I got asked this weekend, somebody kind of got in my face over it. The $50 million, which we're going to talk about more,
Yep.
backfires in some ways because there are views that the KICA assessment keeps going up. The town's sitting on all this money. There are ways the town could spend the money, so they're getting double taxed, and how does that reconcile?
Well, they're not taxed.
They're not taxed, it's assessment, but it's still a check they write.
Well, no, but you're actually directly taxed by KICA. That's your assessment. We are all
That's the same
directly
thing.
taxed.
Yeah.
We are all, none of us, no property owners or residents of Kiawah are directly taxed by the town.
No, but the county has their property tax.
The counties, that goes to the county, and we get a very.
Which I've tried to explain,
Yeah.
which.
Smidgen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm talking
so-
about perception.
Yeah, but there's no question, that is kind of the perception. We gotta educate people that sometimes their perception is actually not well-founded.
But it sounds like the reality is that public funds that we have could be spent by KICA if they applied, and that could offset.
So this is a conversation, I wanna be careful, a kind of broader conversation about the KICA board, with the KICA board, that we've gotta have going forward. And I hope we can have a constructive public discussion about these kinds of issues, is what are the expenditures that are appropriately borne by the municipality? And what are expenditures that are appropriately borne by the homeowners association taxing its residents? So this has come up in the context of a couple things. Trash management is one example. In many other places in the country, municipality does not provide trash management to gated communities. They contract for their own trash management services. There are actually Attorney General's opinions in Florida and Texas that aren't dispositive here, that actually those Attorney General opinions argue that it's unconstitutional. That's not an appropriate use of public funds to provide waste management services to gated communities. We don't have the same opinion in South Carolina, and you can argue that there is a public purpose in making sure that trash or waste is well managed. But there's also a view that even if you can provide it, should be on a contracted basis. We actually subsidize. So this is a situation where the town's multiple sources of revenue subsidize all property owners on Kiawah Island to the tune of about $1 million a year. Is that right, Dorota?
Yes.
About $1 million a year for trash management service. Go to the beach. It's ongoing discussion, and I was actually supposed to get something back to Kevin Donald, which reminds me. The town provides waste management services on the beach. But we're providing those waste management services not on the public trust, public areas of the beach. We're providing it on areas owned that are privately owned by either KICA or the resort or Timbers or the club.
Because the vessels are all above the high tide line.
And the
Which is KICA property.
and the trash receptacles themselves are, So is that something that should appropriately borne by the town and or the homeowners association? The homeowners association says, well, the town should bear that. We don't want to have to bear that, particularly since we collect franchise fees from Island Beach Services, which I actually want to come back to that in the context of our agreements that are coming up. So that's one where the homeowners association is saying, gee, town, you should be responsible for the beach and you should bear those costs, particularly since you have revenues associated with that. But on the flip side of that, we're looking at issues related to architectural review. The town has imposed an architectural review regime, put that in place, that would result in no cost being borne by residents going through the architectural reviews process. But in this case, in contrast to trash, the KICA board has said, we want architectural control even though we've got a higher infrastructure and charge fees and that. So I struggle with trying to kind of understand what the consistent theme is from the standpoint of the association. And we haven't had that discussion ourselves about, you know, what costs are ultimately borne by whom. It is my personal view that there is much more latitude to utilize some of that those town monies and funds, public funds, for purposes that would include kind of behind the gate, because I think a case can be made that there is a legitimate public purpose associated with that, even though there might be incidental benefit. An example that we've talked about is working on cell towers. I mean, could the town justify getting in the business of, you know, cell towers itself? We could, because there's a clear public benefit to having emergency management service coverage and what have you. If the private sectors were not willing to invest, could we actually, you know, exercise eminent domain or a small part of land, work with somebody to construct a cell tower, and actually be the one that operates and maintains that? We could.
I thought about getting in that business too myself.
What's
Yeah,
that?
it's
Yeah.
very lucrative.
Well, another context, the development agreement with the resort specifically contemplated that the town might exercise eminent domain over Kiawah Island utility. And it was a discussion that was actually had about the town purchasing Kiawah Island utility a decade or more ago. Couldn't come close to agreement on price, but if that had gone through, then the town would have owned and operated a large public facility that was behind the gate, providing services to people who lived in a gated community. It's exactly what's going on Seabrook Island right now.
And you can think of other municipalities that have a municipal water, sewer, electrical system, co-ops and the like. So it was not unreasonable to think about back in 2014.
Yeah.
But that's another example. Yeah. The thing I would have everybody remember is, while there's specific places we could spend money behind the gate, we want to make sure that we're not facilitating, let me say this a different way. We probably want and demand better transparency in the overall KICA budget to make sure they're as efficient as they could possibly be and that we're not funding any inefficiencies. And I'm not suggesting there are, I just suggest that we'd want to see that transparency to know where the money's going and where the rest of their money's going.
That makes sense.
So Brad, explain to me if you can, with respect to the use of public funds, the Captain Sam Spit inlet cut that's proposed. That would be the Army Corps, that would be public funds, and that would be...
The Army Corps wouldn't be doing the work.
Who's paying for it?
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie or Jim, because Jim's been involved in these, that both the prior, or each of the three prior inlet relocations, I think there've been three, there've been two? Three. This would be the proposed to be the fourth, have been paid entirely by, or at least the last one has been entirely paid by the Seabrook Island Property Owners Association.
Okay, so let me get the question out. So I answer this, you can, and I might not have all the facts exactly correct, but they're taking our sand, if you will. Why would we not have access? Not that I want it, but I'm just trying to get the consistent understanding of how the law is used. Why wouldn't we then be provided access to Seabrook?
There's a lot of issues related there. I think the predicate was use of public funds. Right now, the applicant is proposing, the sole applicant for the inlet relocation is, again, the Seabrook Island Property Owners Association.
So that's not public?
It's not public, so they would be spending all the money. Even we could certainly, if we chose to do so, spend money on the inlet relocation, just like we've spent public money on other beach renourishment projects, including those which one would argue primarily benefit private property owners, for example, the resort
Yeah,
and the ocean course. You would be making a determination that there's a public purpose, a public benefit to the expenditures of this money. And ultimately, that's what, with any inlet relocation, we would have to determine not only this is a public benefit, there's a public purpose. That public benefit or public purpose outweighs potential other detrimental aspects.
So one would be able to argue there's a public benefit for the inlet.
Yes.
So that, I don't want to get into it. I just want to, you know, something
Well, so
that.
actually,
for consistency.
let's get in, hold that because we actually do have specific issues related to the inlet relocation coming up later in the agenda, and all kind of build on, and we have a further conversation about some of the things I raised last Thursday in that regard.
Let me just say one thing, though, just gotta keep in mind is today, so if you're thinking about charging them beyond the construction costs, some amount for the sand, the town doesn't own the sand. It's owned by private entities, right? So the partners in Kika.
Right now, today.
Today. And so, you know, we're just in the standpoint of permitting the activity.
I understand that.
We're the controller, assuming the Army Corps of Engineers approves it. We control the destiny of whether it happens or not.
Oh, I
So
understand
just
that.
keep that in the back of your mind.
But in 4 months, there could be different owners.
Well, yeah, we'll get into those conversations, but just one qualification. A private property owner where the inlet relocation is proposed to take place, a private property owner owns some of that sand. A large amount of the sand is actually in public trust property, so it's actually owned by the state, effectively managed by the town.
But
Again,
it's
we'll
not-
get into that later.
Yeah.
So I understand all those things, but, okay.
And Madeline, I don't want to put you on the spot. I know you've raised some questions in the past about, you know, kind of use of state tax or other funds, like for civic and cultural facilities and what have you. I want to make sure, you know, everybody is, hopefully we can all on the same page as to the fact that we have $28 million or 26 some, Dorota, currently in the unrestricted, what we define as the unrestricted general fund. No legal constraints on the use of those monies at all. We have another 10-something in capital that is actually not legally restricted in any way. We've simply set that aside for beach renourishment and other capital projects, and never actually utilized it for capital projects. The other 12.8 is restricted, but there are quite a few uses those funds can be put to. And to be very clear, in the statute, and people have a misconception about this, you don't have to show that those funds are attracting tourists. There are some statutorily defined tourism-related expenditures that doesn't have to be any showing whatsoever. It's a permitted, specifically permitted expenditure. Civic and cultural centers is one of those for construction, maintenance, and operation of facilities for civic and cultural activities, including construction and maintenance of access and other nearby roads and utilities.
What are you reading from, Fred?
That's a state.
It's a statute.
It's a state accommodations tax statute. So this establishes there's kind of a generic the category of how the funds can be utilized, and it does say tourism to promote or to provide for tourists, but then there are a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Provide safety for tourists, that hence we use it for our beach patrol and.
So one of the things which we'll talk about in terms of capital projects is that, you know, this road, I mean, any utility work we do in conjunction with this project or redoing Betsy Carson Parkway, to the extent that we now own a portion of that, There's a portion we don't that's still owned by the state. That would all fit within the list of permitted state accommodations tax dollars. Now, I want to focus on why there's been
So this is the statute, chapter 4, state statutes. And what he was reading was this section right here.
Should I continue?
No, I want to,
Oh,
All of these things are what can be used, I'm sorry, these things. So what he was reading, construction maintenance of civic and cultural activities, that's specifically called out.
so there's a reason I've always focused primarily on the state accommodation tax revenue stream. For a couple reasons. One, it's a fairly large number, about 3.1 million, or even more than that now,
Yeah,
that we collect in state accommodations tax revenues annually.
yeah, we get about 3.23 million,
Yeah.
yes.
But by statute, 30% of that needs to go to a tourism marketing organization. That's been the Charleston Visitors Bureau. So we don't have any discretion in that. We approve the allocation, and we get them to, justify their budget. Bottom line is, unless we want to establish our own tourism marketing agency, and it's actually not even easy to do under the statute, the 30%, so a little over 900,000, has to go to CVB. But that leaves more than $2 million that when it comes in each year, we have 2 years to spend that $2 million unless we get the extension. We have to spend it.
And I'd
Remember,
rather,
the second year, we get another 2 million we have to spend. So it's-
So it's constantly, bringing that in. And so if we can, that's why if we can justify fitting almost any expenditure under the state accommodations tax list of permitted expenditure, it's in our interest to do that. Because then we're not touching the general fund and the other funds where we have more latitude.
and when it comes to the KICA discussion, I'd rather spend it on things that are behind the gate that we could justify with KICA than some of these private resorts and other businesses that were funding their marketing budgets.
Well, and this is another unique aspect of state accommodation tax. Not only do we have a lot of state accommodations tax revenues, Charleston generates the most, Isle of Palms generates more than we do. I think, are we next after that?
Mount Pleasant might be.
Mount Pleasant might be a little
And then
ahead.
North Charleston.
I don't think North Charleston is. Maybe Mount Pleasant,
Pleasant.
but we're kind of right up there and the largest generator of state accommodations tax revenues. We are somewhat unique in that we've struggled to find ways in the past, the reason why we have $2.5 million in there right now, to spend all of that money. Most communities, I can tell you, Isle of Palms, which we've mentioned this before in other contexts, they generate a little bit more in state accommodation tax revenues. They're a lot bigger than we are, 6,000 residents and many more hotels. They only allocate, so they're also they give to CVB the rest of the $2.5 million they generate. They spend on beach renourishment and town-related projects. They only allocate $50,000 to outside organizations.
They have a beach erosion problem.
Yes, they
like
do.
We don't.
That's correct. That's correct. Well, that's what they're using. My only point there is they only allocate $50,000 to outside organizations.
Actually, it's a detail, but it's 75.
75, okay. They went up then. They've gone up.
75 for a couple of years.
Okay. And they only allocate to outside organizations that are nonprofit organizations, which is also true of most municipalities. We haven't constrained ourselves in that regard, and there is a state attorney general's opinion that says there is no statutory requirement that state accommodations tax dollars be allocated to only nonprofit organizations, but we've given it to property management companies and the resort and others for tourism marketing purposes.
So I'd have you think about it like this. The bulk of the state accommodation tax money goes to the resort, but they generate the bulk of the tourism dollars.
Yeah,
In fact,
absolutely.
they generate more than they get back. So think about it as kind of research and development. We're reinvesting.
No, I
How they get it.
I got it, yeah, I mean, particularly with respect to the golf, I mean, they generate a lot of state tax.
So when we think about beach renourishment for the ocean course, we're reinvesting in the business it generates.
No, I wasn't being critical, I was just saying,
Yeah,
they
no,
spend a bigger percent, Isle of Palm spend a bigger percentage of their state tax money because they have an erosion
Yep.
problem, and we don't. I
That's
mean,
correct.
that was the only.
That's correct.
Exempt along parts of Eugenia.
Did you have another question?
Yes. So, all of this background, are you setting the table here to tell us where you want to spend this money?
Well, we're setting the table to have those discussions in other specific contexts. Absolutely. This is trying to
This is
say,
not just one project.
I think we should, my view has been, we should be thinking about how to best use our extraordinarily strong financial position to invest in the future. And what that entails, whether that's a land bank, whether that's a redevelopment finance corporation, whether that's other things, I think is part of what the conversation should be about. It's right now we're simply going through the exercise of showing we have an extraordinary amount of resources. One other thing I want to mention about all our general fund, all our funds, and the whole concept of public purpose. Another thing, we're not limited, it has to be used for public purpose. There is no geographic constraint on the use of public funds. It's a policy issue, but there's no legal restriction on where we utilize those resources. We don't have to spend them within the town's municipal boundaries.
Or on land contiguous to the town?
No, it does not. The state statute is the only one that has any reference to the state accommodations tax, and it says the state accommodations taxes need to be spent primarily in the geographic region of the municipality or county. So that's not much of a limitation, but it is a limitation. But there are, for example, Hilton Head, and there was a court case and Attorney General's opinion about this that came up, because Hilton Head, after one of the hurricanes, utilized their state accommodations tax dollars to contribute to other communities that have been more impacted. And the court said, that's a public purpose, and there's no constraint to otherwise, geographic constraint. So just keep that in mind as well. So now we've got this big pot of money. In the past, I guess again, predates me, the thinking was, well, we want to save for the rainy day. The reason why we've been generating and we've had larger reserves than is typically the case for most municipalities is because we can be impacted by storms and other large events. I read from the other day the Government Finance Officers Association guidelines for the amount of cash reserves a municipality should have, and it said 2 to 3 months of operating reserves. We have $8 or $9 million of operating expenses each year, so less than $1 million a month. So 2 to 3 months would be, less than about $2.5 million probably at a current spend rate. We obviously have many more times than that. So now, what are the potential claims? Apart from how we might want to strategically invest, what should we be setting aside to protect against that kind of proverbial rainy day? And that's why we went through this reserve study exercise.
Yes, we just had the reserve study done, and there is 2 parts to it. One was to help us to build a good maintenance plan for all our assets, and the other one was to provide us with a snapshot of what catastrophic scenario, what if everything goes down and we need to, how much money we need to replace the building, repave the roads, rebuild the bridge, and replace our fixed assets here in a town hall. So with that number, it looks like it's about $35 million to cover that. That of course doesn't include our insurance policies, because we do have insurance on all our assets except for the roads, of course. And then our insurance is pretty good, very low deductible. Like we just learned, unfortunately, through the flooding, that works really well. It's the full replacement cost with a $3,000 deductible. Our vehicles are $500 deductible. So the bridge is $100,000. It's a different company, so that's a higher deductible, yet a replacement cost of the bridge.
So,
To replace, that doesn't, well, regardless, that doesn't sound high enough, but even if it's 2 or 3 times, then it's 3 or 4.
Well, it's just a deductible.
No,
Just the
that's the
deductible.
deductible.
Yeah, that's the deductible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
$300,000 deductible.
Yeah.
The bridge is $15 million, 14.
Replacement.
The cost of the bridge, that is our single, this facility, current replacement, it cost, I can't remember, the hard cost were $6 or $8 million about 10 years ago. Current
you have to double it.
estimated, it's 16
$16 million to
million.
replace the building and 1.1 interiors.
Yeah. So that is, if this thing were completely, whether wiped out, completely destroyed by a tornado, fire, what have you, if we had to write a check, that's what it would cost to rebuild this facility. Pardon?
16 million for
But,
Building and one for,
but we don't need to have 16 million set aside because we bought insurance.
So,
That's
but
reimbursed.
insurance is
What's that?
we have to pay and get reimbursed. So
It's
we have to have some money.
reimbursement.
But we can always borrow money if you know you've got, that, people need to get, you don't even have to have a single dollar set aside for, you could issue a bond.
Yeah, it takes a minute to do it, but yeah.
Yeah,
you
a
can.
minute to do. I'm
Yeah.
not saying nothing, but yeah,
Right,
that's why
yeah.
they generally say 2 to 3 months or
Right,
more
right.
of cash reserves for these transitional
Right.
periods. But we're fully insured for the cost of that $35 million of cost it would take to, if every one of our physical assets was wiped out, it would take $35 million to rebuild all that, but all of that is covered by insurance.
But you're not well, at least I don't think I've ever heard before if we have business interruption insurance, because if you're at a point where this building is wiped out, there's no revenue coming in.
So that's a good.
For a long time.
So let's walk through that scenario, because we've tried to do that as well. Either this building's wiped out or the island's shut down because of a Cat 5 hurricane. Island shut down for 2 years.
Mhm.
You don't have, let's assume you have 0 revenues for 2 years.
Mhm.
Okay? Let's walk through that scenario. Most of your expenses go away. You don't have trash management, waste management expenses. You don't have extra CCSO contract expenses. You don't have beach patrol,
He's over there.
beach control, BOR expenses, kind of at that point. There are a whole bunch of expenses that are just not being incurred as well. What are your fixed cost is maybe if the facilities are still up and running, you've got maintenance utilities, it's your headcount cost.
And you're gonna have to find new office space for a 2-year term somewhere.
So our administrative costs, our headcount costs, assuming we kept everybody on, fully on the payroll, fully paid for a 2-year period, that's less than $4 million a year.
Mhm.
So let's say $8 million. Yes, and some of the other expenses, yes, you could be up to $10 or $12 million of expenses for a couple of years where you don't, if you're
Right.
assuming no revenues. Absolutely.
Right.
but that's still a fraction of what we have.
Well, it may be, but I'm just saying, it's, our cost is not just the building, it's the business interruption revenue.
So that's why kind of trying to look at all the potential demands and, you know, the worst case scenario rainy day, how much would we really need to have? Back when the prior town council started this exercise, you probably only had, you know, $10 or $15 million in reserves. I mean, we've grown reserves pretty substantially, pretty quickly. In fact, we've grown it $7 million since this time last year.
No, so I understand, I just wanted to table it, I wanted to make sure.
Absolutely. No,
I'm the engineer, I want to get all the data points out there.
I'm glad you raised that one, because that's then we also looked at what's the most expensive beach renourishment project that we've ever incurred. That was less than $1 million. What's the most cost of a storm cleanup? It's less than $1 million. So there are reasons to have a pool of money.
Yeah, again, I'm just gonna say, if an event comes that wipes out this building, our maximum previous expenditure for beach refurbishment would be at least twice as much. I mean, we spent $1 million in the past, but we were never in a scenario where the island was decimated. So that beach refurbishment would be
There has been, I mean.
much higher.
When was the last, I mean,
When we did, Matthew was our highest one.
That's Matthew and
Yeah, I
plus
mean,
the
there were,
inflation.
there were
That's based
major.
I know, but if we're at the point where this building is gone,
Yeah, we've
there's
never
a
been
lot
at
of
that
beach
point.
to be refurbished that that the $1 million wouldn't pay for. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
Maybe.
The beach refurbishment would be a
Well,
lot.
maybe, but this could be because of a tornado or a fire. Yeah.
Let's, I just wanted to
But
make
anyway,
sure the
it's idea,
facts-
we're actually analytically been trying to go through the exercise. The reserve study was part of that, and the kind of the cash flow analysis is to try to understand what all the potential claims or calls or demands on our reserves are. So we have that in mind where we think about the potential use of those funds for other purposes other than simply letting them accumulate. Because you simply let them accumulate, ultimately to what end?
I understand,
yeah,
I understand where you're going. As Madeline says,
Okay.
you're setting the table.
Okay.
And just FYI, the study is going to be presented at the next town council meeting next week, just so you're going to have a brief presentation so you can ask questions to the engineer. And you'll have a copy of it too before.
So that's safe. I mean, any other questions about kind of budget? Let me just touch on. There's not any kind of mid-year. Been going through the mid-year kind of budget review. We're going to start in the next month or two planning for the next fiscal year budget. We're still ahead of budget.
Yes,
overall.
we do project all our revenues to perform a little better than the budget, and status quo expenditure will actually projecting less than what we budgeted. So we projecting about $4 million to go into reserves, which pretty much they will have a positive in every single fund, but the state accommodation tax, but hence that 2-year extension, we need to spend that money. And I started working on the next year projections that we'll present to you in March. Pretty much we're gonna project based on some discussions with the CVB and the other entities that are in a tourist business. We're gonna project those revenues flat compared to this year, and the service fees that we generate here also flat because we're not really talking about any increases.
So what that means is we got several different sources saying different things about kind of tourism, where tourism was going. We got some that said tourism was going to be down. Some says tourism would be flat. Some said tourism was going to be up because of the changes in the economic conditions. And so what we're basically saying is we're going to take the one that says tourism is flat, so our revenues from tourism would be flat.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If we'll see a drop in the number of tourists, they're gonna make up with the rates, the nightly rates.
Well, so is there a dollar amount of what must be spent by the end of this year, of 2026?
For the state accommodation tax?
Yes.
No, we actually, remember when in May meeting, the council approved the state accommodation tax committee.
Short answer is no, but here's the explanation.
You approved the spending. So for this year, the spending is already approved by you. And we allocated the amount that needs to be spent because we cannot carry over more. So we pretty much spending a little over 2 million in this year, and that is already allocated.
If you
It's
remember.
been allocated or it's been spent?
Allocated, well, some has been spent, some not, because it's, the whole year.
Okay, so we're not dealing with a deadline of September.
If you remember, you may not, when we did the state tax allocation and the votes and everything,
Yep.
most everybody was allocated down slightly, okay, kind of 90% of what they asked for,
Yep.
with the exception of the resort, I think, was the only one that got full allocation. So we spent all the money.
I'm just trying to establish whether or not I need to be thinking about a timeline.
Perfect.
So you'll see the new applications, and you'll approve the town spending of that money in May town council meeting. So pretty soon, but that's going to be next year money to be spent.
So that is a almost ideal segue into kind of the next
That's what I have here.
topic. Extraordinarily adept, which is the financing, the cost and projected cost and financing of the Civic and Cultural Center addition. So what we have from the architect and that team is essentially a pretty detailed projected budget. It entails about $9.5 million of hard cost for the building, and then soft costs that get up right around to about a total of $12 million. Now, there's some things that may be outside of that, related to wastewater
Furnishings.
connection.
Probably furnishings.
I think FF&E is not included in that. I can't remember, probably not.
Probably not, I don't think.
I thought it was in the 12.
I
I have to go
think
back and
there's
look at
audio, video, there is some equipment.
There
but
is
don't-
some, I think that what's not included is chairs and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Furnishings commonly
I
are
don't
not.
Yeah, yeah.
think that was included, but I have to.
I mean, it includes all the infrastructure for the auditorium
Oh, yeah,
portion.
certainly
Yeah,
the
yeah,
infrastructure,
yeah,
yeah, but you have to,
And
you
the
have to be
seats
careful.
for that. What it doesn't, I think,
Yes.
it doesn't include seating for like the multi-purpose.
No, but
community
it's
meetings.
not gonna probably include artwork,
right.
shades, curtains,
Yeah.
things of this,
Yeah,
so there's,
yeah.
Yes,
there's.
there is some additional
Yeah.
cost.
Right.
But so the couple things, there's both since how to pay for it, kind of what structure, where the funds come from, what kind of structure you use, and there's a temporal aspect to all of that. When this facility was built, the town issued
3 million,
three-
GeoBot.
Yeah.
in bonds.
Yeah.
We could do the same thing. We obviously have enough in reserves between our capital budget and unrestricted funds where we could simply write a check for every, expenditure that comes in.
This is what it looks like.
Sideline.
So this is
Sidebar education.
Sidebar.
this year, 2027, total 2028. So we've got this from the architect. $12 million.
Okay.
What I proposed from the beginning is that this project be financed ultimately completely out of state accommodations tax funds, because it can. It's a specifically permitted expenditure to state accommodation tax funds. The issue is if everybody else is in agreement that that's a better utilization of state accommodation tax funds than some of the prior uses, just marketing budgets. We could, and again, this was mentioned by Luke, and consistent with other Attorney General opinions or TURC decisions, that you can specify the future use of state accommodations tax dollars for specific projects. That we could either you just simply utilize general funds or the capital, the unrestricted general fund or capital funds for the expenditures that are going to be incurred. All that money, all that cost is going to be incurred in the next 2 years or so. We could simply do that, and then we could reimburse out of state accommodations tax dollars, or which would be the lowest cost from an interest cost standpoint, or we could get borrow from a bank and or issue bonds. And my view has been, but I'm deferring in this to Councilmember Farrell as chair of the Ways and Means Committee and State Tax Committee. My view is, let's simply issue $10 or $12 million in debt, and then we defease it in the future. It could be a 10-year bond, and we could defease it each year out of future state accommodations tax dollars.
Defease me.
Pay down. Pay down, just like you pay down your
Who
mortgage.
buys that bond? Is it on the bond market, or is it
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Private investors.
and there are a lot a people around the community have actually said they'd be happy to get 3%, 4% tax-free money, and they'd love to contribute to. That would be their way to kind of contribute. We don't have to do that, but we can. The way I look at it, that's a specific pool of proceeds. If you issue the debt, you've got all those proceeds.
So the money's tax-free to the investor for this? I guess so, 'cause it's a municipal bond.
Yeah.
So usually the bank issues it and then they sell it. We don't deal with that part. It just
We could.
We
but-
could, of course.
We could
but-
hire, investment banker and have them issue, but yes.
Yeah.
So my opinion personally, generically, I can understand not giving some state tax money to ANDLN and perhaps some others. I don't like not giving anything to the resort, because they are the generator.
Well, so I just, again, put aside the amounts, the
Yes.
structure, you could say, out of the $2+ million that we have to allocate, we can designate $1 million a year, to defease whatever the cost of the project is over a long period. That still leaves $1 million
Yeah, no,
to
I'm
allocate.
okay with something like that.
Something, or we could say $1.5 million and
I just given my overall
Yeah,
opinion,
yeah.
like I said, the Andel I can see not giving money to, but not the resort, because they are the generator.
Yeah, I'm of the same mind. You don't want to cut your R&D budget to zero.
Yeah,
So you still want to reinvest in the business, and then you have to prioritize which the biggest bang for the buck. I think we probably all agree it's probably the resort, but we can debate that later.
yeah.
I think I agree with you, Russ. I mean, just to give you some numbers, so like this year, we're going to spend about $700,000. We can pay for that out of state tax monies without a problem. We've got $2.5 million in the reserve. Next year, it's 5.3, and then the following year, it's 5.7. So regardless of how much we spend out of the state tax income, we're going to have to finance at least 3, probably closer to 4, for some period of time. If you think if it's 4 and we can do $2 million a year in future, it'll take us 4 years to pay down both 27 and 28. So there's some cash flow issue we're going to have to deal with for the next 6 years to pay for this.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
gonna be-
it's, what's the most effective way, what's the most efficient way?
Yes.
what's- All of those things.
Yeah, but like paying the money in with the state tax money in the future, it sounds at the high level to be developed.
That way, it's money that has to be spent in any event within a short period of time. You fortunately can allocate it in the future to specific defined projects, and it doesn't touch upon ultimately the health and well-being of our other unrestricted funds. I just one little qualification, and Madeline, then I'll turn to your question, is we need to be careful. The resort does not generate the majority of state accommodations tax revenues. They don't, because most of the accommodations tax revenues come from rentals. and there are 1,300 some rentals. The resort is the single largest property manager, and the resort doesn't actually own those properties. They manage those, but they probably have 400 or so, something like that.
If you think about a single entity, there's 1,400 different entities.
Yeah.
There's one resort that has, so they're the largest.
Well, they are.
You're talking about classes
Because of
versus
site-
entities.
So they are clearly the largest generator of probably hospitality taxes.
Well, the sanctuary is actually accommodation taxes too. It's not
But
hospitality.
it's only 250 rooms
but-
versus, but a high dollar amount, yes. So there's no, I don't think the resort accounts for a majority of all accommodation. They are certainly
I agree with that.
the largest,
The largest.
yes, by far.
And I
But
just,
they have the PGA events that's drawing people into, so
So
It-
separate
it's a
from, yes,
consequence.
there's no question that the resort having 5 golf courses and a 5-star hotel and a 5-star restaurant is one of the principal reasons that people think
Yeah.
about coming
Exactly.
to Kiawah Island. No question about that.
So that's why I'm just
Absolutely, yeah,
saying,
yeah.
while you may have rental agencies also contributing, but the rental agencies are contributing money because of what the resort does.
Yeah.
well, and I think of the resort properties as a demand signal. We're really talking about the accommodations that are filled by the demand signal. And I don't want to undersell the Dandel Inn. I mean, for years, we came and stayed at the Dandel Inn and went to Beach Walk.
Well,
There's a lot of people. who do
it's
that.
important to have, it's just because it's 100 rooms, it's just not generating a lot of accommodations, tax revenue
I
directly.
realize that, but categorically, it's the same thing.
No, but
It's
I'm
not-
looking at it because the Andel Inn by itself is not creating the demand. The demand is being created by the
But
resort.
they're creating revenue.
They're recreating, no, they are certainly creating revenue, but the reason why they have revenue is because of the demand created by the resort.
Right,
then
that's why I
there's
said
the-
the last minute,
Because
too. I
of
should
the
make sure we got the revenue versus
uncaptured-
demand.
The uncaptured revenue that comes, I know that I'm a huge draw just by myself, but
That's why we were coming.
whenever I have company coming, they're playing golf. Everybody who comes and visits me plays golf. It's not captured, but it's a huge part of the tourism draw. But that aside.
Well, and I've had this discussion with Mr. Warren, it's kind of interesting, the accommodations, our tourism economy is more than just the accommodations tax. That is simply a tax collected on actually paid overnight accommodations. But if people stay at the Dunlin, they're coming over here to play golf.
And we're getting none of that.
Oh, yes, we
do.
We get their
Just
accommodation.
through the
tax.
business license.
the
So
business license and hospitality taxes, if they're spending,
in the restaurants.
restaurants and
yeah.
drinks and stuff
But we're
like
not
that.
getting the room
No,
accommodation
no.
tax.
We don't get the room accommodations tax, but it's still the fact that I know for competitive reasons, but the more rooms that you have around here available, regardless of whether the town is the direct beneficiary of the accommodations taxes, benefits the
I'm
ecosystem.
just trying to keep the tax, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
Yes, Madeline, you had a question?
My original question,
Yeah.
back to the cost of this building expansion. What is the maximum estimated cost right now of resolving the septic issue?
There is no kind of maximum cost because, and we can talk about this issue later, there are still a lot of uncertainties. We're pursuing 2 paths, parallel paths simultaneously. The less desirable, but by far lower cost option is to simply add to our septic capacity.
If you want to look at big picture, the connection is 250, the septic system will be 750. Pie in the sky numbers.
250 what?
$1,000, $250,000.
Well, but the whether or not we would be able to connect to the force main.
I understand. She's looking for ballpark what numbers, and I.
Well, I'm saying
just
they
trying to get the ballpark.
may, based on something I just received yesterday, or lawyers received yesterday, where they're still talking about, we're gonna get something, which we haven't yet, that talks about gravity. They may still be in the mindset of going under Hallover Creek and connecting to the lift station over Freshfields Road. And our engineers have said, if we had to go that route, many more months and probably north
Oh,
of $1 million.
certainly, I wasn't including, I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
thinking, I was
Yeah,
referring
yeah.
to septic or connecting to the force main.
And there's already I think something in the budget built in for some kind of placeholder. I don't recall specifically what it is. But I said, I could have just kind of made an executive decision that because of so much uncertainty around that, and that given the fact that we would ideally want to connect to septic in any event with regard to this building, wholly apart from, connect to sewer. Connect to sewer in any event, that I was fine with looking at that $250,000 for something that's outside the project scope.
Mhm.
Lower than I thought.
Oh, all right, good.
Potential maximum expenditure.
So I've been on record before of not wanting to reward supplementing Edens for making a bad business investment, but is there a potential of, if Edens wanted to use, if we were able to provide money to Edens to offset or subsidize them getting a restaurant in the King Street space, is that a appropriate use?
Well, yes, it would be, but we can come back to, we have another topic about workforce-related issues. I've had numerous discussions with the Edens, but I've not just discussed with the Edens, I've discussed it with Tommy Hall at Halls, I've discussed it with the Indigo Restaurant Group, Royal Turn, and a couple of others, the owners. Got nothing to do with rents, nothing.
What does that have to do with
It's staff.
Staff.
staff?
Every single one says they just don't, because these are all higher end that want to have highly trained, kind of consistent, wait staff and others in the kitchen. And they say they have enough challenges, on Maybank Highway or in Charleston right now, and that they just do not believe they could appropriately staff a restaurant. Because if it's just a one-off, that's the only business here, or closing down at midnight, staff having to drive home, through along Bohicket and Maine, to West Ashley or Mount Pleasant or Somerville or something. It just.
And I agree, it's a workforce discussion, and I know you got that topic
Yep.
later. I'm just wondering if there's a way to incentivize staff through wages and stuff like that.
Well, I think that's another conversation, and that's one of those kind of, not just it's coming up in the next session, we'll talk a little bit about it related to CARTA. That's a potentially ripe area for collaboration in a Kiawah Island Alliance kind of context. A host of issues there. So anyway, financing, we're kind of to be continued. When we'll have some ongoing discussions about the best, most efficient and effective way to do this. Bottom line is, if we borrow, there's interest costs as opposed to just writing checks. So that's, some several $100,000, $1 million would not be ultimately available over a period of time for something else. On the other hand, the financing costs themselves are also payable out of SATAX dollars.
And would the financing cost be less than what we're making on our investments?
Probably about a push ultimately.
So what happened, for example, like right now, we at 4% on our investments. But what happened with that bond that we have issued for this building, we got to the point that our investments were that were so low that the interest cost was higher that we just decided to go ahead and pay because we still had the money in reserves, but we went ahead and paid it off just because of that question.
Right.
But I guess this is kind of, we need to see what the interest rate will be on the bond, and then that decision can be made.
That's why I
What's
still
the
pay a
rate
mortgage.
on this bond? It's like
Making more money
No, it
investments.
was like 2.3, it was very low.
It's very
but-
low.
but
I
it
would
was-
say it'd probably be fairly close to push. Our
Probably.
borrowing cost would be, we have right now 0 debt, and we have $50 million in cash sitting around, and we continue to generate, regular sources of
Yeah.
revenue. So we're not any question of being able to, float a bond.
Probably
The
would
term of a
be-
bond like that.
So we could do any term we wanted to do, especially in muni space. So, I mean, looking at this, I would probably do like a 5-year, would be pretty typical. It also affects the liquidity. If you do a 5-year, that will probably sell better than a 6-year or a 4-year. You could do a 3-year, which would be very close, and that would work. And the shorter you do, the lower your interest rates generally are. The rates will generally be lower than treasuries. So, because you get state and federal tax exemption from South Carolina for South Carolina buyers. So, but you can generally think about it as kind of somewhere 3.5% right now is what it
Good thing we
would
got a
cost
bond
us.
guy. Good thing we've got a bond guy.
So to be continued on that one, but we've got, we've got a lot of options. So. Any other kind of questions about the Civic and Cultural Center funding? Maybe it's worth putting in, discussing it this, because we have Carta coming at 11.
11, so
and we'll
about
switch-
45 minutes.
We'll
Before
switch
you
it.
leave this up, one other thing.
Yeah.
So I've talked to a couple of members on the audit committee, and we'd like to see this accounted for as a project, not out of operating income.
Yep.
Especially if we do finance. So
Yep.
that way we can help review and manage the cost and see that it's not something not buried in the general ledger.
Again, we've always done capital
Yeah.
projects out of operating before, not ideal.
Yeah.
And that's one reason I've also just thought about just borrowing, literally proceeds. You generate the proceeds now, you draw down, that's all cabined up.
Yeah, you can ring circle the whole thing
Yeah,
and
ring circle the
really
whole
control
thing.
the costs. Okay.
Yes, but we did from operating fund, like this building, however, it was a special project, I haven't set it up. So for accounting purposes, I
It's
actually
set up.
did exactly
Yeah.
what the councilman just mentioned. So
Right.
it's, and,
We can easily see.
and actually with that, with the bond, it was with a different bank that we normally bank, so it was a separate accounting for that too. And you have to for bonds, for
Well, but
reporting
for
on
example,
it.
if we just issued in the next 3 or 4 weeks, maybe it takes a little bit longer than that, a $12 million muni bond, that would sell out right away, and we would have $12 million in proceeds.
Yes.
So then, and we'd start kind of drawing down on that. The cost, all that would be drawn down because all our expenditures would occur within 2 years, but we'd set up a mechanism, we'd be paying it off over whatever, it's 5, 6, 7, whatever years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And through, again, there's that future allocation, current and future
Yeah.
allocation of state accommodations tax
That's-
dollars.
yeah, that's
The other, maybe we should talk a little bit,
Yeah, for this
and
building,
Brian jump in here. We've had some, I think we discussed some of the preliminary high level, not just one source, cost estimates to completely remill and repave, if assuming we also got the other quarter or third of a mile from the county of Betsy Carson Parkway, if we wanted to do that. And the estimate we got from one was a little, just a hair over $1 million.
Yeah, so that was from True Luck.
Yeah.
It's not in bad shape, though. Why do you need to?
I'm not saying, well, it was just two things. One, so we kind of understood what the potential future
Okay, that's okay.
cost was. And True Luck, our experience is True Luck tends to be bid
little bit
very
higher.
high and negotiate down,
Yeah.
plus there were some other costs in there. The other thing, and the only reason I raise it now, is we could think about, within the next year or so, putting it as part of this project, and again, all payable out of state accommodations tax dollars. So no particular reason to do it now. We're definitely going to do some patchwork. You know, that area right at Resurrection Road that always floods and
Yes.
always torn up. There are some drainage issues. The state's just never taken care of it. We're definitely going to do some patchwork. That's, there is either just patching, I think, which should be a fairly modest amount of money, and good patches to last a year or two. You could do kind of carve out an area and do remilling, repaving. That's substantially higher cost, but that didn't seem to make sense. We would only do that in conjunction with the overall road.
No, it doesn't need it.
Well, and that's just the question is, would we want to consider, if we were going to do it at some point in time, consider doing it in conjunction with this project, just to, again, it could all be financed out of state accommodation.
I want to look at it because there's probably some economies of scale, because we're going to have to redo some of the parking. So we're going to be doing asphalting out here anyway. So
Yeah.
once you get the equipment out here, you've got that cost already done. Add a little extra space, might not be that bad.
So,
Well, a little extra space for that. Mobilizing asphalting equipment is one day. It's not a big deal.
well, the other thing to think about is whether what we do in that conjunction, will we want to do Beach Walker Drive at the same time? Our view has been, I think the considered view is, don't do Beach Walker Drive until after Ocean
Yes.
Pines is
Yes.
finished. And for good reason. If you probably don't drive it along it as much as frequently as Lance and I do, but it is substantially deteriorated. Not surprising, you've had dozens of,
I was down it 2 or 3 days ago, yeah, no doubt. But
Yeah.
yeah, you have to wait until.
Yeah,
it's
you
over.
have to wait. So that's at least another year
Yeah.
before that project is well, that's actually, it's probably a year just for phase one, let alone phase two.
Several thousand construction trucks later.
Yeah, but
We're going to wait till they're done.
yeah.
They're tearing it up.
We're also, Infrastructure and Public Works and staff will be taking a look at cost associated with a leisure trail extension here at the Municipal Center. You know, did Trulick actually, they gave us Trulick gave us, but I'm not sure, was it a high-level proposal on doing that?
It was an estimate based off of no engineering or feasibility that they provided for us, and it was just an estimate to cross over the existing
To utilize the
roadway.
existing bridge, roadway, so not a separate.
And
That's way too dangerous.
Yeah.
That's
We're
way too dangerous.
gonna get an engineer to assess that. We're gonna have an engineer come out next week to assess that amongst other things. That's probably the case, but we just wanna get the.
And how are they
traffic.
crossing the parkway?
Crossing Kiawah Island Parkway?
it's down interior parkway, somewhere between the
Probably
utility
just-
easement and Freshfields
Just
egress.
before Freshfields, and then you would have the same kind of lights like you do at KIP.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
you know,
can't imagine a barrier that would stop a cement truck coming crating out of the traffic circle from making a pancake out of somebody.
Well,
Yeah,
that's,
I mean, the education is
You're quite a bit
somewhat
further
scary.
down, that's
Yeah,
why it
it's-
would be further down the road, right?
No, I'm talking about to go across the creek on the road.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, we all stare those trucks down when we're pulling out of here.
My intuition, I'm not an engineer, is probably the same, but that was just one cost estimate. And you can easily find estimates for building pedestrian bridges over creeks that are kind of per 100 yards, per yard or something. We just haven't, that's what your committee's gonna be looking at. But then what was one estimate?
The estimate that Trulick gave to use the existing roadway was right at 345, 343.
But
$343,000.
it's gonna be more than that, because I don't think the main roadway is gonna work.
I would not vote for that.
Okay.
Are we thinking about doing the other side of the road too? Repaving that sidewalk that's on the other side?
Well, what we could certainly do within our right-of-way is simply extend it because it just ends up there 100 yards or 200 yards or something else. We could extend it right down to but then what?
So it's not crossing the bridge, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, the idea is at some point, this is a broader discussion starting with the county. You know, there's interest on multiple parties of having a multi-use path that runs along here all the way up to at least Kiawah River Estates, Kiawah River, and ideally the new South Market Station. The county has interest in that, the resort has interest in that, Kiawah River has interest in that, I suspect the Darby's, the South Market Station would have interest in that. Then the question is, you have a sidewalk on the other side that also runs the entire length, but for this little 200-yard stretch. But you would probably need to have one or two crossings if there's a multi-use path, and particularly the Conservancy is interested in that, to have some.
Is because, like it does, it stops like right up there someplace.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we'd want to have a crosswalk further up that way if we could have a crosswalk further down this way. And you're gonna have to have a crosswalk someplace to get from that side of the
Yep.
road to this side of the road.
Yep.
That means you gotta go across the bridge, and then that path its existing path needs repair because it's sunken and floods. So it's a lot in there we're
Well,
thinking about.
we're
What are
going to
options?
start talking to some, you know, engineers about kind of assessing, you know, these things. And then there's likely going to be specific task orders. Right now, it's kind of a high level, you know, first blush, what do we would think about the potential kind of solution. And then, you know, we would have the control if we are able to get the county side to do something across from Resurrection Road south.
Yep.
Anything above that would involve the county and the state.
I would suggest the first thing you do is get an engineer on board to locate with specificity the safest location to cross Kiawah Island Parkway, because that's where we have to start. But finding the safest location, which still scares me, has to be the first step.
Well, that's exactly why I bring up the other side, because the safest location to get to that side, where a lot of the folks who are currently walking are gonna go, is back here. It's not up where it's 50 miles an hour.
It's slower, yeah.
So I agree with you, but that's exactly why I bring that up, that far side.
Don't we need an overpass?
That'll never fly.
Overpass.
I don't, couple,
Pedestrian overpass?
It's about a lot of money for
not-
limited use.
Pedestrian.
not just a lot of money, but because of the truck height and everything, it would have to be it'd have to be 14,
At least
15 feet high. And we don't have kind of, the trees we have the trees there, plus I'm not sure we have enough land to lead
Yeah.
up to it. And, I mean,
But we could ask the engineer.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, those are capital projects. So,
Can we take a break?
yes,
Oh, just a quick.
5 minutes?
yes.
Breaks.
First fatality.
Meredith, looking at you sitting there hurts my knees. Oh my God, that looks painful.
Yeah, hard.
Oh, okay.
So you were able to pull up that, okay, I wasn't even clear that.
From what I can tell,
Well, see, I
This
don't,
is the
see, I
most
don't
recent
like,
report.
what is that from? Because I don't like that. I mean, because that is not what the statute says.
Okay, and we just pulled up, because you're, you know, Greg did pull up the article that you're referring to.
Yeah, I've got the article, but,
Yeah.
but again, it has to be,
Yeah, they're having their public workshop drafting their project list is February 4th.
but again, they didn't make this up as clear. The county clearly said something.
Yeah, I don't know if they got this from when they went to a meeting, yeah, I don't know.
Go ahead, get started again. Staffing and operation policies and procedures, I'm not sure there's really much to discuss there. I mean, as you all know, we completely updated and revised our HR policies and procedures, although we'll always continue to look at that. We've updated our accounting policies and procedures. We undertook the internal controls assessment. I think one of the recommendations coming out of internal controls, and the audit committee I think agrees with this, that we'll need to adjust is with regard to accounting policies and procedures is to separate out.
Have an accounting manual,
Yeah.
yes, that would be just more for staff and the accounting policies that will be approved if any changes by council. So I'm gonna work on this, and also I'm gonna formalize our credit card policy, and the plan is to get it done by the end of this fiscal year, so. And that policy also will be part of the accounting procedures manual.
One thing I would say is, we finished the financial controls assessment. When the audit committee reconvenes with, we're gonna have one new member, there's 3 other areas we want to talk about. So one is legal and regulatory. Do we have a process for looking at our ordinances, and are they compliant with state and or federal? Number 2 is human resources. Are we doing the things that are in the human resources policy? It's just been revised. So the revision is great, but now it's kind of, we're doing an assessment of that. And the third one is cybersecurity. How do we think about our cybersecurity? Do we have any risk? We did some of that as part of the controls assessment, but it's broader than that. It includes human resources, and it includes legal and compliance. So we're going to talk about those 3 things. We've got 2 guys, one guy who's coming on probably with your approval, and then the second guy who's there. They're both be really good at deciding which one is the next one we should prioritize. We don't want to do all 3. We want to do one. All 3 of them would probably be significantly less expensive than what we just did. But we'll come back to the town council, Ways and Means, with a recommendation. Should we do any, or which one should we do?
Well, at least on cyber, an outside assessment may make sense, but we've been spending more time on it. I think everybody gets the little training sessions that you need to do on various things. And we've discovered some vulnerabilities.
Really?
Well, we were hacked on, social media was hacked, right?
Yeah, but that was more of our doing, by actually putting all the passwords.
We are in the process of creating a cybersecurity policy too, and I know Michael Nordelli, our IT manager, he has set up a number of meetings, so we're already making some steps that will enhance that area.
And the migration to GovCloud last year was a big step also.
That was true, yes. We already done that, but there is still more to come.
Let me know if you want me to look at that.
Sure.
So,
other than that, I think we're in good shape.
The only other thing about staffing was we did have in the budget the position for a resiliency officer.
so that's specifically one of the things we'll talk about, just so everybody, I'm not sure we've actually provided council an update, but one of our community service officers, code enforcement officers, has moved on, moved to Connecticut or something? Pennsylvania, becoming a police chief of a small town up there.
School district.
School district, Tony Gallagher. So right now we have a position out to replace that. One of the things we want to talk about more broadly is, and I think we can have most of this in a separate conversation, discussion about kind of the allocation of code enforcement related resources generally between full-time staff, Barrier Island Ocean Rescue, kind of what priorities are as well. But that's just a position right now that we're simply refilling, so there are no other kind of staffing adjustments in and of itself related to that. The question is kind of going forward within this current calendar year and or next fiscal year, are there other potential staffing changes we need to think about? Two that come to mind. One is one that we had put into the budget, discussed somewhat last year, so I'm going to turn it over to Madeline in a minute to talk about the concept of a chief resiliency officer and what that might entail and whether that's a reallocation of existing responsibilities, a new position, kind of at what level, et cetera. The other, that my view is, and I know there are differences of view on this, but going forward, I don't think it's something we need to tackle now, but further down the road, is adding to our kind of infrastructure, public works, facilities, maintenance capabilities beyond what we have right now. And particularly once we get a build out which is not for 2 years from now, the addition, we're already running into some challenges. Right now, we have between public works and facilities maintenance, it's just Brian and Michael. And Michael kind of serves these odd dual roles, kind of assisting with all the general public works related stuff, but also IT related. And kind of the tension between the two, being in the field versus dealing with issues that arise, is an issue. And then we'll simply have more that we need to kind of manage and maintain with regard to ongoing HVAC issues and a host of other things. But I don't think that that is something that is necessarily going to be a calendar year issue, whether it's something we might want to think about putting into the fiscal budget for a calendar 2027. I don't know. We've got to have some further internal conversations before I'm prepared to make a recommendation to council in the context of the budget.
I always feel like it's a waste of their time to tell them that the soap's out in the Ren's room and stuff like that. They've got other things to do. And there's little things like the bugs in these globes. I hate to bring it up because it's going to be a day of one of their days to vacuum it out. But just little things, we've got a class facility.
Well, some of that kind of stuff, or is there ability to outsource some of that stuff so it doesn't require an FTE? You need to, that's a example of a bunch of stuff like that. What's the highest and best use of time and resources? I think it's a legitimate conversation.
Especially with a bigger facility.
And likewise, I wonder if there's not the opportunity to outsource some of the technical issues.
Like IT stuff?
IT stuff.
We do outsource.
We do.
We do, but Michael, because our outsourced IMS, they essentially do a lot of our work, and sometimes Michael, because we wanted someone in-house, so we don't always have to contact them and try to come, but we do have.
He's been working on my computer the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
That's why it's not here.
Yeah, I've got glitches with mine, and I just hate to bug him about.
Yeah, and I had issues with mine yesterday, and so.
So if anybody sent me an email the last 3 days and I didn't respond, that's why.
I'm glad you told me that.
Hmm?
I'm glad you told me that.
Just applevalley54@yahoo.com, please. Back me up on my personal computer.
So there had been a specific recommendation previously of it was originally, I think, out of the Environmental Committee, but then the separately established Resiliency Committee to look at a resiliency, we've said Chief Resiliency Officer, whether that is the right title or not, but a specific role related to resiliency issues. And ma'am, you'd be willing to kind of share your thoughts and perspective on that?
So a little bit of background. I think Kiawah had established itself with the 2017 sea level rise report and then the follow-up adaptive report of 18. Kiawah really had taken a step to lead the Sea Islands in looking at issues like stormwater and sea level rise. And that kind of morphed a little bit into the Marsh Management Comprehensive Plan. But in the interim, we haven't had the same kind of sustained attempts to manage broad resiliency issues. And I think we lost our leadership role there. And there are so many critical resiliency issues that we're looking at, many of which, because my focus has been environmental and sustainability, but there's also issues that relate to security that could be incorporated into a chief resiliency role. There are ongoing issues that come up. And the most recent one is Lance and I were both looking at stormwater issues and found that the Planning Commission had established a working group to look at setting up stormwater standards. And so there was a good cross-functionality to that kind of a project. And further, it also morphs into what Russ is doing in terms of safety issues, certain kinds of issues. So there are, and by ourselves and by our standing committees, we don't have the capacity or the talent or the skill set to manage the many, many different elements and aspects of some of these large resiliency issues. I don't know how to apply for funding. I don't know how to go for, I don't even know where to start that process, and I don't know that our staff at this point has that capacity. So somebody who knows how to work the system would be a valuable add. If we are going to also kind of move forward with the ecotourism initiative that's identified in Kiawah Next, then we need somebody driving that. And again, while I would love to devote more time to all of this, I don't have a lot more. And I think we know how hard the individual council members, and my goodness, you are working kind of day in, day out. But I think that establishing a person to take it all under, to try to coordinate the infinite number of different projects we can look at, and the really significant number of potential resiliency issues that we're going to be dealing with. Sea level is rising. Storms are getting more violent. They're getting more frequent. Runoff is, and the management of our runoff is huge. And we have to look just not at our properties, but at adjacent properties. And somebody needs to be doing that. Somebody needs to take, well, in my opinion, I think it would be extremely helpful if one person was put in charge of really knowing what's going on from a resiliency, sustainability, incorporating also wildlife issues, and kind of monitoring it all.
I totally agree. You said a lot of things that I was thinking, you and I, of course, have talked about this. And we saw it firsthand with the example you gave. You said two things that really stuck out to me. One was a leadership role. This is not clearly in anybody's job jar, so it's in nobody's job jar. So, everybody kind of has a piece of it. I think it needs to be centrally coalesced. And as we saw when you and I were just catching up, the cross-communication amongst different pillars and stakeholders that have a role in this, not only within the town, but within the community. I really think we need somebody that is the go-to, that pulls it all together, that is the hub of the wheel.
I think you bring another issue into this, which is if we are going to do reaching out to the watershed and try to coordinate activities of Seabrook and Lower Johns Island as well as Kiawah, Conservancy, then it makes a lot of sense to me to have one person who is the repository, who's the leader and the repository of that initiative. We should take a leadership role. He was got the brains, it's got the staff, it's got the financial resources, and it's got the need, and it's got a population, according to the most recent survey results we got. It's got a population that's plugged into this issue and wants us to take leadership on it. It's a win all around, as far as I'm concerned. And yes, I know adding senior staff is a significant financial commitment. I happen to believe that this is an issue that deserves it.
Me too.
So, let me ask a question. I agree with kind of the high level, let's take a leadership, and these things are important. But when you think about hiring somebody, you mentioned several different areas that are very different and diverse.
Yeah.
And they, to me, they don't naturally fit together. So I'm trying to think in my mind, what are we trying to accomplish? So take one and just walk me through it a little bit further. So you mentioned the watershed area. What would you have someone do in coordinating with the county and Seabrook and us? What would they do regarding the watershed? Or is it a flooding issue? Or is it marsh management? How do you think about that? I can't get my head around that. That's why I'm asking the question. Or is it somebody to identify issues that we should be focused on?
I think probably the first answer that comes is if we're looking at marsh, it's not specific only to Kiawah. If we're looking at pollution of our waterways, for instance, it's not only the Kiawah River or the Stono River or any of the waterways around here that are affected, so that we've got toxic situations, for instance, with oysters.
If I could jump in, I think it also has to do with stormwater in all the development and ensuring that as development is happening, it's not making our problem worse because we're downstream from it.
Okay, so that's a good one to talk about for me too. So in terms of stormwater management on the island, the vast majority of that is in place. The whole lagoon system was built to manage stormwater. So it's really the new developments, kind of Ocean Pines and Upper Beachwalker is where we need some engineering help to make sure that, but for me, that's kind of a modest impact. I mean, the lagoons are already there. It's kind of how do you...
So the lagoons need care and feeding, and we discussed in the workshop that Madeline and I had 2 weeks ago, there's a lot of sediment building up in those lagoons. And golf balls and alligators. But there's things that need to happen to the lagoons that aren't happening to make sure that they function properly.
Yep.
And Ocean Pines.
Isn't that a Kika thing?
I was going to let him finish, but it is a Kika thing.
It
And I've
is.
actually talked to them about applying for SATEX money for flood mitigation if they've got sediment building up. And to kind of, Pond 76 is a great example. It's the one, it's on the other side of the road for me. And they have no interest in doing that. But they say sediment is a problem. How do we help them?
Well, I think it's more than Madeline, Lance, and Luke cajoling them. I think it's a role that a CRO could go more deliberately, sit down with them, sit down with Ryan and the team that does all that, and help with the prioritization of getting that done. Another example that comes to mind is
Okay,
I watched Ocean Pines.
Before you leave that one, sorry, I'll pick on you. How is it going to be received if we go to Kika and say, let us help you with your priorities?
I don't know.
I don't see that's going to be it's not going to be received well. I'm just asking.
I don't know if we have got mutual objectives.
They
Why
came
not
to the
work
meeting
together?
we had and were very willing to participate. I mean, Shannon had me over Friday. We talked about a whole bunch of issues that she wants to work together with us on.
And
I'm optimistic, but I haven't seen it or heard it.
one thing that I wanted to just bring up, you guys may already be aware of this, so historically, when the sea level rise report was completed, one of the recommendations was to hire a chief resiliency officer. The town would. And essentially, that person would work with Kika, and Kika had agreed they had a number of priorities as part of that long recommendation, because the town realized that a lot of those recommendations really don't impact us directly, but yet a lot of them was put in there. And at the time, Lucas Hernandez, which a lot of you guys know, it was essentially the town was going to hire him, and then essentially he was going to also work for Kika. So essentially he was going to be split between both entities. At the time, then the town decided, well, there's probably more work for Kika, and Kika decided to hire him on. So there was historically some sort of relationship collaboration between the two, that we were going to hire, the town would hire this person, and then that person would work for us 20 hours or 25 hours, whatever it is, and then they would work with Kika, we would pay, and then Kika would reimburse us the cost. So there was some discussion about cost sharing, because the concern was, is there enough work for the town at the time to have a full-time resiliency officer? And then we had talked about maybe cost sharing an individual, and Lucas ended up just going to the work for Kika.
That's good background.
That's a little bit of the background of
My
Lucas.
observation a year into this, a little more than a year with Infrastructure Public Works, and the discussions I've had with Madeline and now having with Joanne, I think there's more than enough going on in the town right now to keep a person full-time occupied.
Yeah, I think of a number of initiatives that have just kind of died on the vine because we don't have a person who's been in charge to grab hold of them and see them through. So, Jim, the bridge, the ramp at the bridge is one of those projects. It just kind of died, and we didn't come to a good resolution of it. And I'm not sure there is a good resolution to it, but but the fact is that there have been, I feel badly when stuff like that doesn't get resolved, and it should be, one way or the other.
We've had the same thing. I mean, we've been talking about stormwater and sea level rise impacts to the Mingo Curve and to potentially the bridge and other infrastructure for, since we kicked off the Infrastructure Public Works Committee. The challenge we've had is coordinating. I mean, we could probably just dive in and do it, but there's more implications in infrastructure and public works, and to responsibly do it, we've had a hard time just getting our arms around getting the right people together. I mean, just calling a meeting has been burdensome, to be honest, to get the right players together. That if somebody was in a leadership role and said, the amalgamation or the confluence of all of this coming together is me, Brian, Jim, whoever, Joanne, come to this meeting, we're going to sit down and sort this out. We need somebody to do that.
And it's part of somebody's objectives.
Yes.
To tackle these projects and see them through to resolution.
Keeps getting out prioritized.
But I agree with raising the Mingle Point curve. I don't think I need a resiliency officer to do that, though. Why don't we just do it?
I'm not sure that we need to raise it, to be honest, for the frequency that it might happen.
Oh, I do. Well, regardless, but I'm just
Okay,
saying.
well,
I just think we
let's
need
put
some-
that one aside right now, because that would require some additional work that we're, maybe we can talk about that, strategic priorities coming straight. But focusing on this, just a couple questions or thoughts. I agree that we don't have a person really on staff now that's focused on some of the things you talked about. For example, grants. Grants
Yeah, that's a big one.
would be one. You and I had the conversation about just simply doing all the data gathering and analytical work to simply update, not rewrite the sea level rise report, to incorporate more recent NOAA data and observed data from Charleston, other places, and that we do have a lot of other kind of projects that are going on that maybe fall through the cracks and don't get followed up on. So I could see the need for better coordination on those issues. The question I'm asking myself is, do we have that capability in-house right now, and it just hasn't been, focused? We haven't designated somebody to focus on certain those kinds of things or have that coordinating role. That's just one question. And then, or two is if we do bring in somebody new, a new staffer, which I'm certainly not opposed to, and there may well be a need for, is that I'm not sure I kind of buy into the notion of a chief resiliency officer. And that's more of a title or nomenclature issue versus somebody who, a staff person, still a relatively senior person, who has some either professional or educational capabilities in their area that could do this related work. Then the question becomes, who are they reporting to? How does that, interact with the planning department, the Department of Wildlife and Natural Resources, and other kind of institutions within the town? I did know, and I've talked to her previously, looked at the only model I've found recently. I've actually talked to this woman. There is, 2 years ago, Sullivan's Island did hire somebody, a young woman by the name of Rebecca Fanning, to be the kind of the first director of resiliency generally. But she's within their building, planning, and zoning department. Of course, that also includes the building official and the director of planning and zoning. She's in that department. But that's her focus, is grants and dealing with a lot of these kind of environmental management cross-functional or cross-organizational issues. So I believe there is a need for somebody that's doing some things we're not doing currently, more focused on some of the things that we're doing in a scattershot way and trying to pull that together and coordinate that. I'm just not clear kind of in my own mind, Madeline, exactly what the level is, seniority, title, and where it fits within the organization.
And I haven't drilled down to those particular issues. I just want to reinforce that for me, a lot of the opportunity here would be to establish Kiawah as, and maybe with Sullivan's Island, as one of the leaders of the southeastern coastal island community in the expertise and in identifying those issues, but also the workforce to take it forward and to make things happen. That's not going to happen with just me and Russ trying to drive it.
I was going to say the same thing, that I think something that's missing right now is the leadership outreach communications role of what does Kiawah want to be, what is our ethos, what are we messaging? I've thought about.
We're not coordinating with the city of Charleston and getting conversations about their water plan with the county on development of their standards, what best practices other communities are doing.
I'd like to see this person get to where they're invited to symposia and they're the experts.
And I've thought about the question you asked, where does it fit organizationally? And I think kind of the way you asked the question is where my answer is that I don't think it reports to any of those functions. I think it's a peer to all those functions that you talked about. And, one thing we didn't talk about, but I mentioned just briefly, is there's a communications aspect too. I mean, there's somebody who could sit side by side with Meredith and help with the communications outreach program as well.
So, Stephanie was just pointing out, in city of Charleston, now they actually have I think more than just one person, but that's the city of Charleston.
They have one resiliency, one.
But it's actually the mayor's office of resiliency and sustainability. It's in the office of the mayor, so it's not within any of the other standing departments. I'm not wedded to this, but is there general support for a resiliency, sustainability focused role that would do some of this, grant writing, coordinating with external stakeholders, not just around Kiawah, but externally as well, that would have the capability to update and do, memos, reports, and things like that? I'm generally supportive of that. I think there need to have some further conversation about kind of exactly what the title is and where kind of the reporting role and everything.
I
There's
was,
a long list of things we could do, but I mean, another one is, I'd like somebody who actually understands water systems and sewer systems in the United States are due for a major overhaul. I'd really like somebody to take a look at what KIU has under the hood and make sure that I mean, they tell us it's okay, but I'd like somebody who knows what they're talking about to make sure.
So as I hear you guys talk, and I'm the devil's advocate here, please just bear with me, okay? I don't mean to be critical, I'm trying to be devil's advocate. I've hired several hundred people in my career, and the thing that I've found that really works, or the thing that I've been challenged by senior management, is to clearly define what this person's gonna do, what their area of responsibility is gonna be, and put them in a position to succeed. And everything I'm hearing sounds spectacular. It's like, I don't mean this to sound trite, but it's like motherhood and apple pie. I agree with everything we're talking about. But I think we need to kind of focus what this person is gonna do and what are they gonna accomplish and how are you gonna measure them. Is it gonna be outreach, purely outreach, kind of to our sister organizations and coordinating with them? That's sort of one method of hiring somebody or one job. Or is it gonna be to raise the curve and, you know, look at the plans for stormwater management on projects or things that you're gonna do something that's gonna be hard, fast, specific accomplishments? And I think I would ask us all to think about that. What do we wanna get out of this role? And is it gonna be real impactful or more soft impact with
I agree, we absolutely need
organizations?
those.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. I wanted to, like a 5-year plan. What is it we want to achieve with this position in 5 years?
What I would suggest, we've actually got our CARTA guest here now, and we need to transition to the next topic area, is that Stephanie and I and Madeline and maybe working with planning department and Jim's department, come up with kind of a notional, goals and objectives, and then a kind of a draft position description.
I'm happy to help with that too.
I agree.
I mean, I hope you don't take my comments to be critical. I'm just know the struggle I've
Next
had
step.
in the
Yeah.
past.
Take my shoes and fashion away. A la Khrushchev.
I got it.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, that's the next step. I don't want to jump ahead and put the cart before the horse without there being some kind of general consensus that this is a project worth pursuing. If it is conceptually, then I'll be happy to take it to the next stage.
And I'll help you with
Includes
it.
a lot of specifics. Yeah, I was gonna immediately ask you that.
I think we can put together a thoughtful, value-added position description with kind of relevant experience, educational background, and then kind of what some of the key functions, roles, responsibilities. And I think if we put that all on paper, we'll see that there are things that, yeah, nobody else is kind of really doing those things right now, or certainly not in a considered way. And then we'll bring it back to everybody.
And if it doesn't have merit, it doesn't. But yeah, let us
that
further
okay?
define it.
Okay. All right, next I want to, I think we've got our guest here. They've been waiting very patiently.
Yeah, thanks. Andrea's here from CARTA.
So thank you for your patience. Please, if you wouldn't mind just coming up and joining the table. So now we're shifting to regional challenges, and we have all the McBride slides to be able to show and everything.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask you. Did you submit slides?
No,
this is
McBride's after this.
Oh.
Yeah.
This
Some
is
of
it,
those.
McBride's.
But anyway,
I have to
so,
Meredith?
you guys,
Need to-
I mean, do you want to level set since you've had the prior meetings? I was not.
Sure, and you're the Deputy Director for Operations
Of the COG.
of the COG, okay. And so Andrea
The
is.
Council of Governments, this is Berkeley, Dorchester, and Charleston County.
So we've been circling around and having discussions in the community for a long time, but more deliberately circling around. How do we handle transit for all the reasons that we all can think of? You know, tourists, locals, workforce, you know, lots of things. Supporting the Kiawah Seabrook area, what's that look like? What could it look like? Also, with Craig's help, by coming to the CARTA meetings and socializing the idea amongst, you know, people like Joe Boykin and Ron and you and others, started getting the idea out there as well, as far as the other priorities that the region's looking at, which I hope I'm not taking your shtick. So Andrea agreed to come sit with us today just to talk more about what that might look like, what the needs are, just kind of start getting our heads better around it. Ron's going to come to the Infrastructure and Public Works meeting then in 2 weeks on the 12th, and have a similar discussion through that committee process when we start kind of coalescing things together. There's a lot of things to think about, a lot of things to talk about, but I'll turn it over to you, just the idea of, what's a transit solution look like for us?
And just a little bit of additional context. You may recall we actually approved the CARTA budget a couple of meetings ago, and we were all posing the question, okay, why are we involved in this process and why do we have to approve this? What role does Kiawah play at all? Because there's no public transit down this way. And so this is part of the conversation I've had with the Johns Island Task Force, and then Charleston County City Council members, where, like Jim McBride, the mayor, is broader transit issues related to Johns Island, both focused on seeing if we can eliminate cars on the road as much as possible, and dealing with some of these workforce related issues, challenges of getting a workforce down to the lower end of the Sea Islands. And the frustration, I think, on the part of Johns Island and Seabrook and Kiawah is, yeah, we're supposedly part of this ecosystem, but we don't see any of it. And I know there's been a real focused effort on at least getting CARTA onto Johns Island and along Maybank, and maybe you can update us where that is. And then if that's doable, or if that's something that's in the works, what is the potential for coming down all the way to Seafields and or this facility for transiting, and you're passing Kiawah River, you're passing the new Johns Island, the South Market Station, and everything else as this area continues to be built.
In the MUSC facility.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Would you reintroduce our guest and her role, please?
Andrea, tell me your last name. So I say
Kozlowski.
Kozlowski, okay, that's what I was going to say. And why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Andrea Kozlowski. I am the Deputy Director of Operations and Support at the Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester Council of Governments. It's a lot of words. We are the regional planning agency for the Tri-County region. We do a lot of different things at the COG. Transit is one of them. We run CARTA and Tri-County Link. Tri-County Link is the rural system, and CARTA is the urban system. I'm so glad to be here. We have been trying to get in communications with Freshfields for years to find out their needs, to just start the conversation of workforce transit. We've had conversations with the sanctuary. At the time when we did speak to them, they had their own circulators that they were running, and they felt that they were pretty confident in what they were doing. Love to have another conversation with them as well. When Lance and I met, I also talked to him about our van pool program. We have a van pool program that we run from the COG. It's $30 a person to ride in the vehicle. It could either be subsidized by the employer or the employees can pay for it. We have 15 passenger vans. They take the van home with them. It basically becomes theirs. We pay for the gas, we pay for the maintenance. We come and swap them out as needed when maintenance is due on them, or when there's a tire leak or anything like that. So that's a second option that could immediately happen. We have the vans currently available. So I'd love to have that conversation with either Freshfields or the sanctuary to figure out how we can start that ball rolling and see if there's even a need. The challenge with that is shifts, but I feel like in that area, it should not be too much of a problem, because I feel like they should be on the same schedules at least. We can help them set up a route, we can help them set up a location to meet. The driver of the van can take the van home every day if that works out better for them. So there's a lot of opportunities that we can provide to that location. This is a great time because we are well underway in comprehensive operational analysis for both systems. So we're looking at every route that we have, how we can expand service, what services maybe not needed anymore and how we could use those funds to serve other areas. We know Johns Island is growing. Love to hear your feedback on not only Johns Island, but this area in Kiawah and what you see your needs are. Happy to take it back and have a conversation. You can even have a smaller focus group to talk about the needs of the islands.
So I guess the first question I would pose, Andrea, thank you very much for letting us come and spend some time with us, and for Ron coming in a couple of weeks, is first, what's the challenge or difficulty in at least getting CARTA, regular public transit, onto Johns Island and Maybank, since it's a significant commercial core right now. Population growth it's pretty substantial right now, a lot of infill. Just take that specific discrete issue and kind of what are the issues there and what are the plans?
So in the current process that we're in with the comprehensive operational analysis, we're looking at all of that, seeing where are the key locations where people want to go. It's a perception that transit is needed in a lot of areas. Mount Pleasant's a great example. We have 3 routes in Mount Pleasant. There's very low ridership on them. And most of it is a time. You know, if you live in North Charleston or work in Mount Pleasant, it's probably going to take you 2 hours currently to get to your job. And a lot of people just don't want to invest that time. So we really want to streamline the route to Johns Island, figure out is there 5 key locations that people want to go to? Is there just something on the island that we just need to circulate people through? Are we bringing people on the island, off the island, or just around the island? So that's the big conversation that needs to happen, is to figure out where those key locations are.
But clearly you've concluded in CARTA in the past, and the COG, is that there isn't sufficient need or demand on Johns Island.
We didn't get the public feedback that we need to get to prove to our federal transit partners who fund us that there is a desire and a need. There was not. I truly believe that's different right now. So that's why this is such a great time to open up this conversation. And we did have a really good turnout on Johns Island for our public hearing that we held. So we got a lot of great feedback from people. So that started the conversation, but we're ready if there's context that you have at any locations that you can think of that would be key locations for us to get the ridership that's needed to sustain a route.
Well, let's talk about, and I don't know if we can solve for all this, but I think we need to be more engaged in the conversation going forward. What we do know is that that the resort employs 1,600 people. Not just sanctuary, it's a large infrastructure. Obviously different shifts, a little seasonality, but about 1,500 to 1,600 employees. Mark, you may have some of this information, you may know it better than I. I believe the Kiawah Partners, which includes Kiawah Real Estate and particularly the Kiawah Island Club, is in 500 to 600, maybe flexing to 700 to 800 in the peak season. So a couple of thousand just for those 2 employers, or 350 or so at least, which I'd last heard from Eden's. The various, those aren't employees of Eden's. They simply are the property owner and less or to all the tenants in Freshfields Village, but 350 or so. And that was even before MUSC and Seafields. So you're adding more. So, what's that?
And Seabrook, we were talking before Seabrook.
And Seabrook. So you've got, that's employees, people who are regularly employed here each and every day. We also know that we have 2,500, more than 2,000 vehicles coming onto Kiawah Island every morning between the hours of 6:45 and 10 a.m. The vast majority of those are not residents. They're either employees or they're workers or service providers. They're all coming down Betsy Carrison. That's going to grow when you have, the South Market Station there, another commercial retail facility. So there's a lot, and that's generating a lot of a lot of cars on the road. So kind of, how do you guys look at that? We can give you that kind of data and analysis, but at what point, does it translate into, it makes sense to have, bus service coming down Maybank and all the way down Bo Hickett and Betsy Garrison to either Freshfields or this facility.
Yeah, what would be really helpful is to get all of them in a room, even if it's a Teams call, because the perception of transit is one thing. It's zip code data, where are your people coming from? Do they want to park and ride in North Charleston and then us to bring them this far, or do they want to stop, on 17 somewhere? It's getting all that feedback on where those park and ride locations could be. Where's the real estate available for us to buy real estate to develop a park and ride lot? Or is it just a circulator route that people, they want to park somewhere on Johns Island and be brought this way? So to get all those key players in a room, we'd be happy to come out here and host a town hall meeting and sit down with everybody to get feedback on what the perception of their employees are and who would ride.
We'll be
So
able to-
I have exactly experience with this. When I first started working after college, I was with an engineering firm, 2,000 people at a campus, and they used the same kind of shuttle vans that you're referring to. And there were pockets, whether there were apartment complexes or condominium or single-family homes, there were pockets where what worked really well, an individual in one of those pockets would be given the van for free and ridership for free, and they had a set time, 8 a.m. or whatever it happened to be is when it leaves, and it went to that location, whether it's a sanctuary or Freshfields or whatever it happened to be. It worked. I was a part of that. It worked. I didn't like it sometimes because my workday was cut short, where if you just have an hourly worker, that it's not. But it did work. And I also observed, I know we don't have, obviously, a transit rail system here, but where I was going, I observed larger buses that would go from a certain park and ride to a distribution point here in the island, and then you would have a smaller shuttle van to take you to the remaining location. It has worked. And I don't see why it wouldn't work here, because we do have enough density, enough people coming here. There's no reason why it wouldn't work here.
So some background for the meeting on the 12th that Ron's coming to. We, have representatives right now from the resort, from the club, and from KICA, the Community Association. And I need to get Eden's contact to invite somebody from Freshfields so they can come to that. Maybe they should be standing, coming. But so you'll have the initial people there to hear from them, top of mind, and then maybe be able to start a process to dig deeper into it. We had a transit conversation, was it 2 or 3 months ago, Brian? My sense, tell me if you caught it differently when we talked about it, was that there's a desire amongst the stakeholders now to have a more organized transit solution for their employees and for their businesses. They're looking to us to try to figure out, do we do an intra-island kind of thing even, which makes my head hurt, because it makes me all of a sudden start thinking about what your job's like. Because I know how to come up with the problem, but I don't know how to come up with the solution for what we're talking about. But it seems like the complexity and cost maybe is driving them to want to look at alternatives. Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting as we peel this back to be able to figure that out with that group.
Yeah, I'd love to tag along with them to that meeting. Just
Please.
start those connections.
So this is the thing that might be one of the, if we move forward, and depending on kind of what structure it is, something like the Kiawah Island Alliance, that may be a right topic of conversation for that.
Yeah.
One of the discussions, again, I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school here, that in a conversation I had with Roger Warren from the resort standpoint, is they already, they house some of their employees up on Crown Commons or other areas, and they bring them down themselves. He raised a very practical issue, particularly if you're solving for different employees, is, one, where they give up their cars, are they willing to come on transit? There has to be some regularity. Mm-hmm. But the other issue is there's probably my guess is there's not sufficient support or willingness on the part of the broader body politic here for like car to buses just driving all over Kiawah Island.
Talk about gate problems.
So, yeah, gate issues. So what you would be looking at is potentially a terminus, either here or Freshfields, but then you've got to solve for getting all of those employees there. So then it becomes, is there the appetite for a joint town, Kika, partners, resort, managed transit system that solves for that last mile, 6 or 8 miles, actually.
That's doable.
That
I mean,
it is
I
doable. You've got to
observe
have everybody kind of buy into that.
Yeah.
But that's a
doable.
classic kind of public-private partnership solution. But that only makes sense, we start working on that if there is the pure kind of public solution. And it's not just to bring employees down here. We had, Andrea, I was amazed. We had our first ever Kiawah night at the museum. We provided 2 vans, buses, to take residents into Kiawah Island for a night at the Charleston Museum. I mean, literally, we thought we were just going to do one with 40 people. The first 10 or 15 minutes, doubled a bit. There would be a lot of people that would be interested. We've got aging in place population by and large, that if there were good transit solutions to go up to the dinners on Maybank Island or into Charleston, and then come back not having to drive themselves, I think there'd be some, it's not just employees, but all of this is taking cars off the road, the idea.
Yeah, I agree.
So.
I agree.
I need to invite the park people to come to that meeting on the 12th too.
That's right, okay.
But Andrea, I do have to say that what really was surprising to me, because this program that started after I was employed at this engineering organization, it started up and it was almost like a word of mouth. Hey, would you be willing, you Andrea, we'll give you the van, would you be willing to be the driver? And we'll get you 10, 12, whatever. And it was shocking how quickly that went like wildfire. You just needed to push the button and give you the van, and within a week, you had a full van. So it was shocking.
I've got a question, and you made me think of, the mayor and I both had our careers in the DC area, so Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority and slug lines, if you've heard of that. For those of you who don't know, to go in the HOV lanes and to get parking and stuff, there's literally parking lots where people just randomly show up that are designated, and cars just pull through, and somebody you don't know gets in your car, and you drive to work. And surprisingly, there's not dead bodies littered all over I-95 in the Beltway. But one of the caveats they have in those programs that I've seen is if somebody van pools to work and then they have a family issue or something where they need to get home, there's a number they can call to get a ride. Do you have a similar thing?
We do. We have an emergency ride home program. You can either use Uber or Lyft, and we'll reimburse them for the cost of their transportation.
That's pretty good.
Yep.
The other thing that might help is kind of tangent to the dinner shuttle is an airport shuttle. And I know there's logistics about what time does it run and back and forth, but that's something where there's constant demand and there's 3 or 4 different kind of underground services that supply travel to the airport. And you can see what's happening with the parking situation there, so it's even more important. That would be another thing to think about.
Yeah, good point.
And I would say that might have greater applicability than even the dinner shuttle. It would be close, I think. But there's somebody going to the airport every day.
Yeah, I would use it if it was available.
So,
At a reasonable price.
So I think, but you raised some good questions, and I'm not sure, I certainly don't have the answers. We kind of did an informal survey of our own town staff, 28 people. How many employees are really willing to give up their cars is a real question. And so, yeah, sure, you could see it for like the seasonal employees, H-1Bs and others that don't have vehicles necessarily, really taking advantages. But whether full-time employees that are used to driving here would be willing to get off the road. Maybe if you had a bus you could pick up, drop off your car at KJ, now the Lowe's, I guess.
Lowe's.
Lowe's. And then that last little stretch down here, maybe.
Yeah,
I
there
don't-
has to be a start though, so we
Yeah.
have to at least get that conversation going, because there has to be an incentive to the employee. To me, it would be to not have to drive. So I just get to get on my phone, there's free Wi-Fi in the vehicle, you can do whatever you need to do, but time to get here, you're at your front door, basically.
There's a guy who came to our infrastructure public works that has bought land that he wants to turn into a parking lot for like a place where people can park and carpool or whatever. And it could be a bus stop or
Absolutely.
a
Mr.
van
Park.
bus stop, yeah.
Some of the best analogs to learn from are winter resorts, because they have profiles of different user types that are very similar to our profiles. And they've had to deal with it for decades because of the nature of the geography and weather conditions and so forth. But I would suggest that there are probably 3 or 4 that would be worth just seeing what their systems are like, what their challenges were, and what works, what doesn't, what's evolved over time.
Mark, we both missed, what was
missed
the example that you
Winter
started?
resorts.
Like
Winter resorts.
Aspen, Snowmass,
Dale.
I mean, there are any number that we could learn from in terms of prototypes. Not that they would translate exactly, but the profile is very similar in terms of user types. And several of them use rather interesting incentives to encourage that to happen naturally.
Something you made me think of when you said that, you probably were thinking it too, is that if you get your Epic Pass, you can ski at several resorts.
Right.
And so they got to get people from Beaver Creek to Breck and Vail, and so they have to do that out too.
All right. Andrea, thank you very much. Look forward to continuing the conversation. We can certainly be a facilitator to try to bring together different stakeholders. And if it makes sense to have a COG/CARTA/ Sea Island set of stakeholders, we're happy to host that down here.
Thank you, yeah, and I'll definitely plan on coming on the 12th, just to start that connection and sidebars with whoever will be in.
And this is a pretty good segue into some of this other set of issues around here. And you're welcome to stay, but if you need to get back up to North Charleston, I understand that. I don't go to as many COG meetings or CARTA meetings as I should, because I'm a designated rep, but it's up 26. It's past the airport, so it's a
hall.
Yeah, it's a hall.
Well, thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't know kind of what we had pulled together, but.
So these were the reduced slides that you
Yeah,
had
some,
together, that said.
so, and I kind of put in order, so.
Neil, or you are controlling it?
I'd forwarded to all you guys Jim McBride's presentation, which is available on YouTube, and there were a bunch of slides. He very much wanted to be here with us today to walk through some of this, but he had literally week-long commitment, some training. But he's very focused on, for those who don't recall, Jim McBride is a Charleston City Council member, but his district includes portions of James Island and Johns Island. And I still talk to a lot of people. A lot of people don't realize that 20% of Johns Island is in the city of Charleston. And almost all of Maybank is. So from when you cross the river all the way across, down Maybank to Main Road, almost all of that is city of Charleston, which is what you see up there. All the yellow is city of Charleston. So it gets a little complicated because you've got the city, and then all the other areas that are not yellow is unincorporated Charleston County, so which the county is responsible for. And so dealing with road issues. Now, further complicating it, I don't know if one of these next slides is the state stuff.
Is it,
Well, anyway, okay,
Yeah,
just.
they're just, yeah.
Go ahead, keep going. Yeah, okay.
yeah.
So, the part of the problem, so we now have city, we have county, but, this may show that every one of these roads is in red, and the next slide may show it is owned by the state.
Yeah.
So the responsibility of the state, it's the responsibility of SCDOT to manage and maintain every one of these roads. Not the county, not the city. County and city are both trying to get conveyed some of these roads.
That's crazy. I mean, that's just crazy. It's insane that what the state.
It's same. So every major artery on Johns Island is the responsibility of the state to maintain. And as we'll get to, there's an issue there. Go ahead to the next slide.
You know, even plow ground and even.
Let's keep going, I'm sure.
Major arteries make sense, but it's the
Yeah.
neighborhoods that the
Yeah,
state
like
owns.
plow
That
ground
doesn't
and
make sense.
Well, even some of the major, I mean, like Maybank Highway, you know, should that be Charleston City says, well, we want that because.
Yeah, you can argue that, for
Yeah.
sure, but the
But
neighborhoods.
here's the.
Plow ground is an example. That should not be a state road. That's a county road. Should be a county.
Okay, so that's part of the issue, but here's the reason why we wanted to get portion of Betsy Carson from the state. 41,000 miles of roads, fourth most miles of roads managed by a state Department of Transportation in the United States. Fourth most, and we're a fraction of the size of many others. And our gas tax, one reason we pay low gas prices here is because our gas tax is lower than most states, significantly lower than most states. So more roads to maintain, less gas tax means less resources. I think it's continues to just show all this.
Raise the tax.
Anyway, that's not about that. Okay, this next slide is pretty amazing.
Lord.
That's the, state maintained roads. So, then John's Logar, John, this way. I don't know where he's going. Somebody needs to tell him that, I don't
Maybe he
know.
went to the bus.
No, he started to try to get in.
41,000 people on board. There's these
Yeah.
You can hit the next
Oh,
slide.
you did, you
Neil.
went around the long way.
Oh, it's right there.
So John's Logar, we're actually, this is on the state roads. We're talking about John's Island.
Listening on the way down.
John's Island here. So this just gives you an idea of what the problem is. I'm not sure we have any more
Neil,
slides
you
here.
go. Do it again.
We kind of skipped through. This is a point that's been made. You can rapidly go through this.
Go,
Just
yeah.
how much growth there is. Just rapidly.
Go, Neil.
He's over there.
Just keep going.
Yeah, you can just keep going to this.
Just keep going. Cycle through. It's just the population growth of John's Island. Just cycle all through this.
Wait, what was that?
What's that? So, anyway. Oh, this is the fail. John, is this the failing F minus?
F asterisk, they call it.
F asterisk.
Yeah, you can see the little asterisk there? But
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the, those of us who go into Charleston, occasionally, this is the River and Maybank intersection. It's not just an F, it's an F asterisk.
What's
And
LOS?
what's that?
What's
Level
the-
of service.
Level of service.
Level, so it's a failed level of service. Now, it's below their standard metric for a failed level of service. And as Jim McBride keeps pointing out, as John Zlogar does, if those of you who don't know, John is the publisher of John's Island Advocate and chair of the John's Island Task Force, is that notwithstanding this fact, new projects keep being, some are pursuant to pre-existing rights and PDs and others, but infill projects keep being built around there. What the John's Island Advocate, I don't want to speak for John, he's happy to, you're welcome to chime in, is, well, at least let's not upzone for more density.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
So this date is 2019.
Yep.
In the last 5-6 years, there have been significant improvements.
Well, there's been.
The addition of that lane.
They made some
Traffic
lane
light.
remarking, and they've added the northern pitchfork.
Yeah, they've got the pitchfork. So has that failing grade changed?
It's still F asterisk.
I don't know, I'm surprised it's not.
Ron Mitchum from BCD COG presented to County Council a month or two ago, pretty much that same slide, and it was still failing, still F asterisk.
What is the legend V/C, vehicles per what?
Could you, V slash?
C.
I'm not sure.
V/C, level of service.
Well, LOS is level of service.
Vehicles per capacity, it's a capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, capacity.
Per capacity.
Capacity, no, you don't, we don't need to go back through these, that's all right. The bottom line is, kind of apropos of our conversation with COG and CARDA, conversations that we have as part of Johns Island Task Force. I've got a roundtable, a fireside chat coming up with Mayor Coxwell as part of our world, continuing to talk about these broader regional issues because they ultimately impact quality of life for all of us. It's not just, it's getting to the airport, it's getting to Home Depot, it's getting to Costco. If you want to see a dinner and show in Charleston, and now it used to be, not that long ago, it could take 35 minutes to get there. Now it could easily take an hour and a half.
Well, I would also add, it's the other thing, it's not just time, it's safety. Because you're incurring a lot more risk with more cars on the road, whether it's overcapacity or failed roads. That what concerns me more than just the time.
So one of the things that it's going to be important for this community to think about is whether or not to support the transportation sales tax. Now, the last referendum failed. And it failed fairly significantly, although I believe Kiawah was the only precinct, the only jurisdiction to actually voted in favor of the Mark Clark.
The only one in the area. There were some in North Charleston and West Ashley did.
In this area, and it was literally by 50% and like 1 or 2 votes, but the rest went down 60-40. But there is a new transportation sales tax proposal that's going to come before all of us at some point in time, likely. And so the county's been doing a lot of outreach about that. We had somebody from the county come in and talk about that. So it's proposed to be $4.25 billion, $4.25 billion over some, several years. The county's been doing, and John, help me out, please jump in here, but the county's been doing a lot of outreach because the last referendum, notwithstanding the strong support of the county government, and county council, failed in part because there was a lot of distrust about, the use of funds and over what period of time. There was no real accountability. Projects that were supposed to have been done years and years ago still hadn't been done. So the question is there going to be community support simply for another blank check for a sales tax? Almost certainly not. But if you can put into the referendum kind of actually how the dollars are going to be utilized and they can be held to account for that, then is it worthy of support? And the point that policymakers will make is, guys, this is the only source of funding for the county for infrastructure and roads related projects. There isn't anything else. Now, part of it is, and we have the Post and Courier, I have it up here, is John, you've been to a couple of county meetings where they talked about the at least at this right now, the high level allocation.
Yes, right. Yeah.
And of that $4.25 million, I believe, $850 million would be for Greenbelt.
Well, 20% for Greenbelt and 80% for transportation. Transportation broken down into projects, CARDA, bike ped, and so forth. Basically an 80-20 split.
And one of the things that's been critically important, and this leads into other conversations, is that 20% for Greenbelt. And there are some in the community that would argue for even more than that. That's probably kind of the minimum. And the reason for that, and if Jim were here, and maybe you could talk about it, he has a couple specific examples. I know you've shared some slides, John, where one of the reasons, and I alluded to this last Thursday to support conservation efforts on Johns Island. I mean, if you don't care about the environment, you probably still care about traffic and congestion. And the best way to ensure that there isn't more congestion in the future is to take a rural piece of property that's now agrarian and agriculture and make sure that it's not developed and filled in with commercial and residential. If it's put into conservation, that means that many fewer cars on the road in the future.
But in accordance with all the city and the county and the consultants all use this thing called the Institute of Traffic Engineers Trip Generation Manual. It basically tells them for a given type of development how many cars are going to be generated per day. And for example, single-family housing, detached housing, it's just over 9 trips per day per house. So if you got 100 houses, you got 900 trips per weekday. Those are the weekday trips. If it's apartment complex, it's less than that because fewer cars per dwelling unit and so forth. So to Brad's point, if you've got 100 houses down, up on Mohican Road someplace, it's going to be on average 900 cars per day. So that's why it's really important to really look at that. And for example, several years ago, just north of the airport, JZI, they were going to put a development in there, and man, it was about 250 houses. Now multiply that by 9, and that's how many more houses would have not only been on River Road, but would have been at that intersection, that F asterisk intersection that would have gone through there, because that's pretty much where all the traffic is going to go to. So yeah, so conserving land, the environmental aspect is fantastic, but there's also the land use aspect that's also important.
Do you look at, you must, commercial developments like shopping centers?
Yeah, this trip generation manual has 100, 200 different categories. If it's commercial as well as residential, high-rise apartments, low-rise apartments, if it's next to a train station or not, those all factor into their estimates of how much traffic is generated.
I've said it before, but I'm very concerned about Andale West and this idea of a big grocery store, because this whole half of Johns Island is now going to be one to drive down here and go to that grocery store.
Yeah, yeah, and all that, the traffic engineers use that manual to figure out how many trips there'll be.
Thank you. And so kind of connecting the dots and all of this, I mean, this was from the Post and Courier. We can't find something actually put out by the county itself, but this new tax would propose to generate $4.25 billion over 25 years. And a little over $2.5 billion would go to infrastructure projects. 20%, as John noted, $850 million towards Greenbelt, $650 million towards public transits. We were just talking about CARTA, and another $190 million toward bike and pedestrian improvements, sidewalks, and multi-use trails. So again, there's still work to be done, but one of the things that would be incumbent upon this community and the leadership of this community is to engage with this community about whether or not to support the transportation sales tax. But right now, we're helping to shape what that referendum might look like, and a whole bunch of stakeholders to continue to provide input on that. But this is, again, regional interest, impact directly on the quality of our life, the traffic and congestion, water quality, habitat for wildlife, etc. And so we're not in this alone. That's why I've made a concerted effort to try to work with John and the Johns Island Task Force, Johns Island Council, our collaboration councils, and meet with others, because we've got to do a more effective job than the past that we have of advocating some of our collective interest and kind of get away from a mindset that had existed, I think, for a long period of time, that Kiawah was just concerned about Kiawah and everything kind of our interest stop at our water's edge.
Go ahead.
I have just a quick tangential question, because I was asked 3 times over the weekend. The $7.5 million that they found, is that spending it from River Road to the bridge, or where is that money being spent? Because River Road
would
to the
be
bridge is only like
for,
100
well,
yards.
right now, the lanes narrow down to one, right about but just before the light at, what's the intersection?
That's where
we call
the
late.
pitchfork is.
Where the northern pitchfork connects. So the idea is now that you would have a full second lane going off to the Stono River Bridge. They would be narrower lanes as proposed than typically the case. At least a foot, 11 instead of 12, in part to avoid taking down a couple of grand trees.
Yeah, the merge is eliminated.
Yeah, the merge is eliminated, so you would have a full, because that's where you get a lot of
So it's
pitch.
basically from where the pitchfork starts, where the stoplight is, to the bridge.
Well, yes, but yes.
There's already pavement on the other.
Yeah, pretty much there.
The merge occurs between that light
So from the merge to the
and the
bridge.
River Maybank intersection. And so, right, I mean, it would eliminate the merge.
Okay.
All along, there would be a second lane off island. Now, as John and others have pointed out, you know, that's only part of the solution. You've got to have the southern pitchfork, and then you've got to make sure that the southern pitchfork and the northern pitchfork align. They connect at the same place on Maybank Highway, and that you want the southern pitchfork to align with Kane/Road. Rather than just kind of it being a jumbled mess. So there's a lot to happen. Now, there's also stuff that needs to happen all along Maybank Highway. Some of that is, John, I think is already, are they putting pedestrian crossing now?
No, nothing. Oh, well, on Maybank,
Maybank.
on James Island, yes, they are.
On James Island, but
Yes.
not yet on John's Island.
If you go on James Island, on Maybank, you'll see them working over by Terrace Plaza, Terrace Theater.
Yeah, the poorhouse and Terrace Theater right there, because we probably all parked there and tried to cross that. That is, but the same problem with Maybank Highway. The 4 or 5 miles of Maybank Highway, there is not a single pedestrian crossing, and yet you're building all these new infill developments where families are living, restaurants and shopping, but there's no way for people to actually, other than getting in their car, to get to these places.
I apologize if you talked to this when I stepped out for a moment, but I was glad you talked about like conservation and taking the ability to develop land off the table through different kinds of programs to do that, to affect the traffic and transit issues. Just a quick background to kind of get to my question. So I lived the last 16 years in Alexandria, Virginia, right at ground zero where everybody wanted to get across the Eisenhower Bridge. And so the build it, they will come backfires often. And so, you know, I think we've talked as a group about not wanting Hilton Head's approach and finding creative ways to throttle traffic as well as support traffic and alternative solutions. So what the transportation sales tax, is it just to build roads, or is it to do solutions that help manage traffic in some of those kinds of ways?
Well, again, it's called a transportation sales tax, but the enabling legislation allows it to also have greenbelt funds in it, i.e. land conservation. So it does both of those. I think one of the issues, and this is my personal opinion, is that things are not being looked at strategically. I mean, the fact that you guys are spending 2 days here talking about all these issues is amazing, okay? And you're talking, and now you've got a smaller set of issues, I understand that. But I think it's still more project-oriented as opposed to solution-oriented. And so that, I think, is still a problem that the county needs to address, my personal opinion.
One of the issues, and John and I have talked about this, is, and I want to sit down with it's a good thing that the new county council chair is Joe Boykin, who represents Johns Island. But the question is, what is a project versus what is just some kind of basic blocking and tackling, repair and maintenance? And I think we would all agree, if you drive up and down Main Road in Bohicket, particularly Main Road, there are some obvious areas where you just need to, a 100-yard stretch where you need to widen to 3 lanes, have a turn lane.
So,
And it's not, it wouldn't take that much money to do those little things, and they would help with both safety and traffic, and, throughput of traffic. I can't figure out why this county just doesn't, well, they look at that and well, that's not maintenance and repair, and that has to be a project, and it has to be funded by the transportation sales tax or something like that. I can't get, you have a better sense of.
So Russ and Luke will probably especially appreciate this, but in my years fighting the city of Alexandria about traffic, it dawned on me that traffic is very much like fluid dynamics. And fluid dynamics, and how do you add friction, and how do you pipe capacity versus, what will flow and where it flows and how it flows. At scale, traffic very much behaves like fluid dynamics.
It is, it's an order, yeah, that's why they call it an order.
And John, help understand that how the interaction between the state and the county on roads in the state. So, any projects or work that's done on Main Road, it's a state-owned road, but it's in the county. So can the county unilaterally do work on it?
Well, not unilaterally. They organize it with the state to do that. I mean, and I'm not the total expert on this, but for example, the gas tax you were talking about earlier, some of that comes back to the county, but it's a formula such that we don't actually get back all the money that we send. So that's one of those issues. The other thing is there's a feeling that because we have a transportation sales tax, like most of the richer counties do, that then DOT says, well, you've got that covered. We'll actually spend money in the poorer parts of it, which might be the right way to go. I don't know. But so therefore, you're actually spending more money than you have to because the state's not necessarily managing what they have to do. But the county does work with the state on repaving, because they actually pave a lot of the state roads. Because as you saw, there's not a lot of really county roads here. And so it's a mishmash of funds and who's responsible for whatever it might be. But on any given day on Johns Island, they were talking about redoing the bridge on Burton Creek over on River Road. That's a state project. You're talking about adding the second lane on Maybank. That's a state road, but it's a county project. Okay, so you can, it's a mishmash of things, and the funds come from wherever they might come from.
And I don't be willing to, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but while we've got you here in regional issues, maybe offer a couple of thoughts, a summary, if you will, on our most recent Johns Island Task Force meeting, John, where we focused on the Conservancy and Low Country Land Trust and conservation issues on Johns Island.
Oh, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I was directing all that at you.
Oh, I was reading. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Something about Johns Island and conservation.
But I was, if you wouldn't, putting you on the spot and okay. Prepared for this, the last Johns Island Task Force meeting was kind of a different focus. This was now focused on conservation issues on Johns Island. And maybe talk a little bit about that. We've got presentations from both Low Country Land Trust and that. Then at that time it was the Kiawah Conservancy. The day later was the Conservancy of the Sea Islands.
So the big picture of the conservation communities, I wish I had some slides. They've got four thrusts. One is an outer greenbelt. By outer greenbelt, hopefully you all know where the Yates Basin is. You come up the Yates Basin through the Edisto River area, up through the lakes, Lake Moultrie, and down through Francis Marion Forest, and back down to the Atlantic Ocean. So think of it as broad outer beltway. I'm sorry, greenway, but you can think about it as a beltway, outer greenway, and they're trying to conserve that, and they're doing a really good job. If you're familiar with the Yates Basin, of course, it's been a success story. If you move in from that, they're talking about conserving corridors. Again, what the Kiawah Conservancy or Conservancy of the Sea Islands is doing is one of their corridors is Bohicket and Betsy Carrison, right? That's one of the corridors, both from the standpoint of ecological as well as from the standpoint of view sheds, as well as river along the Kiawah River, which is also River Road, if you will. That's another corridor they're going at. A third one is an inner green belt. In other words, you've got the urban growth boundary, which I hope you all know about. And if you ever see a picture, I mean, you can go in Google Earth or Google Maps, and you can see the urban growth boundary. Because there are high-density developments, and then there's a line, and there's nothing behind it, or, you know, there's very little development behind it. So one of the things is that urban growth boundary can be changed by 5 votes on county council, and the zoning behind it. So in perpetuity, if you conserve that land, it can't be developed. And so that's that inner green belt around the current urban growth boundary. And I'm going to figure out the fourth one. There is the inner green belt, outer green belt. The sea islands. And so, you know, whether it be, you know, Kiawah, Johns Island, Wadmalaw, Edisto, all those islands have a long history, cultural history as well as ecological significance. And so there's a lot of groups, just like Kiawah Conservancy, as well as Edisto Open Land Trust, that are really focused on those areas and trying to conserve those sea islands. So that's kind of their 4 thrusts. So then when you come down to Kiawah, you get down more into the corridors, like I mentioned, Bohicket, Betsy Carrison, and River Road, and trying to conserve those. And, you know, right now on Johns Island, the Sea Island, or Conservancy of the Sea Islands, it's going to be really tough. Yeah. Conservancy of the Sea Islands, Low Country Land Trust, as well as the Farm Bureau Conservancy, are all actively working to conserve land. You continue to see more land. Brad mentioned earlier, I think it was like 9.6% of the land is conserved in Johns Island. Just a few years ago, it was like 5.4. Okay, so there's actually a lot of progress going on.
But 30% plus of Wadmalaw.
Yeah, it's nowhere close to Wadmalaw.
Oh, Wadmalaw, no. And then Edisto is like 50%. Yes, no. And the difference there is it all comes down to willing landowners. You know, the county doesn't go in and say to somebody, you got to conserve this piece of land. It's willing landowners, and there's large willing landowners on Wadmalaw that have wanted to conserve their land. And it's a little bit more difficult on Johns Island because there's smaller tracts. But the conservancies are doing a great job. They just need to increase it from that 10% to, I think their objective is 30% to get to that point. And in terms of the quality of life for all of us, both on the ecological side as well as the reduced traffic side, viewscapes and everything else is the reason they're trying to do this. Is that what you wanted?
Yes, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. So we're actually coming up to kind of lunch and the end of this session, but other thoughts or perspectives on kind of our regional engagement, because this does all of this, both these last 2 discussion sessions kind of feed into some of the other strategic objectives.
Workforce availability.
Well, that's right. We touched on workforce a little bit, and I want to drive home one point, and Mark, I don't know if you can speak for any of the other organizations you've provided, you know, services to, but a continuing challenge for employers down here is to get, you know, workers. I don't know if you saw the recent article, the resort was hosting a job fair, and it was willing to provide immediate, essentially signing bonuses, as it were. But again, it relates very much to this King Street Grill issue, because I get questions about that all the time. And people are blame Edens, and they'll say, oh, rents are way too high. Maybe rents are much higher than for others around here or not. But to an organization, a restaurant group organization I've spoken to, not a single one has ever said money or rents are the issue. Every single one of them has said getting staffing down here is the issue. So that kind of raises, it's one of these conversations that I feel it's incumbent on me to have with the broader community. I'm not sure that my fellow council members share this as much, but it kind of comes back to conversations that could be had with Riverstone and the Goodwin family about the utilization of some of the land that they own. And this goes back kind of to when it was proposed that the original Andel project be annexed into the town, and there were going to be 500 apartment units. Yeah, there are a lot of issues related to that. But the question is, if the community wants services down here, there has to be affordable housing.
So it's a
Roger has
two-edged.
told me he's
Within-
looking at, he has
within-
land on Betsy Carrington and he wants to put up.
Well, I think the resort, they've acquired additional land, and I think the resort's desire is to build some additional housing on property they own there in the lower Johns
Yeah,
Island.
but
So
don't hold their breath, they don't do anything fast.
they don't do anything very quickly, but that still only scratches the surface. So the community has to understand there's a trade-off. If you don't want affordable housing close by,
You don't have services.
you're not gonna have the level of services that you might.
It could be a two-edged sword, though, because part of the solution could create another problem. And when I lived in Alexandria, I lived in mixed-use housing, loved my neighbors, it was great. Lived next to one of the largest HUD projects, in the country. One of the challenges here, I think, is depending on the worker, you potentially are creating a need for families to get to schools. Another worker is living here because their job's here, but their spouse getting to West Ashley. We may be just setting up a transit problem flow in the other direction.
It's a complicated issue, and I'm not saying what the solution is. I'm just saying that people have identified a problem, and that problem is not going to go away. That's only going to get worse. As to what the solution is, or all the balancing of interests and considerations around a potential solution set is something else. But just understand that if no workers can afford to live anywhere around here, then it's going to be increasingly difficult to get them to come down here.
Well, the temperature of the community when Andale West was being discussed, they were willing to let go of the services. They didn't want the house.
Well, that was I'd say there were two issues conflated. There were, I think that's fair to say that there were some element of that. I actually objected at the time, but it wasn't because of that. It was simply because my view is the town hadn't given sufficient consideration to the implications of having in the town itself a growing set of residents who did not have access to the kinds of amenities that everybody else did, and then was the expectation going to be on going forward, reasonably so, where are my schools, where are my tennis courts, where's my pool, where's my public park, where's my library, and everything
And
else.
it goes into the comment that they didn't, the flavor that I came away with, they didn't want the housing.
So.
And there was a ton of misinformation.
Yeah,
There was.
there was. It wasn't handled well all around. I think there's been kind of an acknowledgement. We don't need to relitigate that. But these are the kinds of things that we as a broader community are going to have to realize that, there are trade-offs. But what I hope that we all can agree on that at least I've come around, and for a variety of reasons, being strongly supportive of the work of the Sea Islands, Conservancy of the Sea Islands, Low Country Land Trust, and others, because not only does it protect, and we'll get into this separately, water quality, habitat, the character of Johns Island from a historical and ethnological standpoint, but also it relieves traffic pressures going forward.
Can I add a thought to since the King Street Edens thing came up a few times, I think that wages is part of the equation also, and what are pay people for the hardship and that kind of stuff. And I think that directly affects a business owner's profit discussion, because they don't want to pass cost on for a restaurant, so they can't afford to eat there. But there's some kind of trade space in there where is there a way to incentivize business owners, like a restaurant owner, for example, to augment wages so that people are willing to come, because they won't come under the current profit wage model that they want to use?
So what you're saying is correct. Hankey's has no trouble filling up, and they are expensive. They're packed.
But I think it comes to what does the community want? Because I've heard a ton of folks saying, I wish they'd take King Street Grill and build an affordable place where I can take my kids or grandkids
That's what I
to
hear.
get a burger.
Yeah.
If you build a burger joint, and they don't want McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or something like that, but if you want a burger joint that's affordable for your grandkids, you can't afford to pay the wages that you're gonna have to hire to get there. So there's that mismatch, what people want, what they're willing to pay, and what the restaurant owner has to pay to get quality people.
And what the restaurant owner wants to make themselves. So is there a way to contribute to that business model to pay the wages?
Yeah, now you're talking about subsidizing private entities, which.
That becomes, that is fraught with
I'm not promoting it,
challenges.
I'm just asking it.
Fraught with challenges. And you can't just start with one.
Slippery slope.
Yeah.
You know, I'll bet you though, so you charge $2 more per burger at this new place, they'll do fine.
It's cheaper than getting a burger.
We still need some.
Yeah, I think they'll do fine.
One room that you gotta hire.
All right, so
Yeah, you can use like
we've come,
iPads
yes,
and
John,
movies and stuff.
yes.
In support of what the discussion topic is, I think we'd all agree that if the alliance strategy is initiated, I think it's a great topic because it's not only do you solve it, but it's a continuing responsibility, right? When the partners were going through an update of the planned development district for Orange Hill, they did a lot of background research in terms of impact on Johns Island in particular. Partners were very surprised to learn that over 65% of the employees of the club live on Johns Island or Wadmore. They knew it was a high percentage. They didn't know it was that high. So there are models. I'm not saying the club model is the preferred one, but there are models that could develop some symmetry or balance of growth and serving the greater community. The original concepts that were presented during in 1974 with the original PD for Kiawah Island at that time was, a key selling point was it would become an employer of an area of the county that needed employee activity. They needed reasons for people to grow and work there, and it worked. So updates of information like that to the words that you used, Mayor, of balance. It's a balancing strategy. It's not weighted heavily one way or the other. It should be a balanced approach. But I think it's a great topic for the Alliance in terms of how can we collaborate as a group to develop that balance. Because right now, we don't have other than the two bodies that are represented here, there's not a whole lot of excessive influence on what's happening in the world. I mean, every time we see more trees coming down on Johns Island, it's like, where are those people working? Where do they go every day? And I don't know, I think it's an intriguing challenge that we're fully capable of aiding in terms of supporting a better way of thinking.
Thank you, Mark. A good conclusion to the morning discussion, and half an hour break right now, and then we'll get started again. Thank you.
Tonight, drive the channel too.